Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Lydia Guardo. Raymond Guardo married Jacqueline in 1956. In the early years of their marriage, they had two children, a son named Bruno and a daughter named Nadia. At first, their family appeared to be typical and happy. However, after Nadia's birth, Raymond was convicted of armed robbery and sentenced to 5 years in prison. While Raymond was in prison, his wife Jacqueline began an affair with another man and became pregnant. When she was allowed to visit him in prison, she informed him that the child was not his. Despite this, he tolerated his wife's infidelity and expressed his desire to adopt the child. Soon, on November 13, 1960, the girl was born, named Lydia Guardo. Years later, Raymond was released from prison, but his relationship with his wife Jacqueline has worsened. She was left alone to care for their 3 children and seemed to have little affection for them. So she decided to send her children to an orphanage, and soon after, her children were adopted by a family. Fortunately, the children were placed with a loving family that provided them with everything they needed to begin a new chapter in their lives. With this support, Bruno, the oldest child, always held onto the hope that his biological parents would come for him and his younger sisters. He even encouraged his sisters to believe that this would happen one day. While still in prison, Raymond saw an advertisement in the newspaper for a woman named Lucienne Ulpat, who was seeking a pen pal. After his release, he found Lucienne and soon married her. Following the marriage, he became determined to reclaim his children by any means. One night, he took a gun and broke into the home of the family that was taking care of his children. The noise frightened the girls. Nadia didn't remember what her father, Raymond, looked like, and Lydia had never seen him before. They thought he might be a kidnapper and were worried that they might be in danger. Raymond successfully took the children from their foster family and placed them in his car, despite their threats to call the police. After several hours of driving, he brought the children to his home, where he introduced them to Lucienne, telling them that she was their new mother and that they would need to follow her rules. During the first years of living together, everything seemed quite stable, at least judging by family photos from the time. The family moved to a new house in a quiet neighborhood. Raymond received a cash allowance and started his own business, which focused on instant postcard printing and various office tasks. Lucienne occasionally worked in his company, but primarily handled office work. However, as time passed, the family's life began to change dramatically. The children suffered abuse from their father, Raymond, and stepmother, Lucienne. Lydia's first memory from this period was witnessing Raymond beat Bruno for playing with a neighbor's child. When Raymond and Lucienne went to work, they hired young girls to care for the children. Upon returning home, he would pressure these girls to drink alcohol with him. On one occasion, he even attempted to persuade one of the girls to have sex, but she managed to escape. The girl's father then came to the house to confront Raymond and seriously injured him. After that incident, Raymond stopped hiring nannies. Later, he bought a trailer to take his family on vacation to the beach. Once they arrived, they spent time swimming and relaxing like other vacationers. However, an unsettling event occurred. While in the water, Raymond approached his daughter, Nadia, and pressed her against him inappropriately. She struggled to escape his grip, but this only made things worse. From that point on, she became the target of Raymond's abuse. Lydia recalls one day, she heard Nadia's cries coming from the trailer. This marked the beginning of Raymond's sexual abuse of one of his daughters. After that, parents, Raymond and Lucienne, often beat and do other terrible things to their children. Bruno and Nadia stopped going to elementary school, while Lydia, who had never been to school, faced severe mistreatment. This may have been because she was not Raymond's biological daughter. A few years later, around 1971, When Lydia was over 8 years old, the bullying began to get worse. The first incident occurs when Lucienne gets angry because Lydia comes home dirty after playing outside. Her stepmother, Lucienne, put her in a bathtub filled with boiling water and bleach. She recalls that her sensitive skin began to peel and float to the surface of the water. Hearing her screams, Raymond rushed into the bathroom, pulled she out, and laid her on the bed. He attempted to treat her burns with vegetable oil, but soon realized the injuries were severe. Then, she was taken to the hospital, and doctors determined she had third-degree burns. So that Lucienne wouldn't be responsible for the incident, Raymond blamed the city government for providing too hot water. Meanwhile, Lydia was transferred to the intensive care unit and then to the burns unit at the Lion City Hospital, where she remained for several months. She also underwent several skin grafts. Raymond is always by Lydia's side, not because he was a good father, but just to keep her from sharing the incident with others. Eventually, he grew weary of the situation and declared that he would take she home to continue her treatment. Medical professionals were against this decision, but Raymond secured the support of their family doctor, who wrote a confirming that he would continue to treat Lydia. Consequently, Raymond picked Lydia up and carried her out of the burn unit. Back home, Raymond begins to take care of Lydia. He regularly changed her dressings and started to touch her inappropriately. One day, he came home with a camera, claiming he needed to take pictures for the insurance company. He first photographed Lydia, asking her to smile, and then took pictures of her private areas. He then told the girl that the family doctor had prescribed this medicine. He forced her to inhale that drug, leaving her in a semi-conscious state. Although she was aware that he was about to do something strange and painful, she was unable to resist. At that time, he was sexually assaulting she. During this time, Raymond's wife, Lucienne, did not intervene. Instead, she encouraged his behavior. For 9 years, Lydia came to see what was happening as normal. She believed her father, Raymond, loved her, which led her to think there was nothing wrong with his actions. Years later, in an interview with a French television show, Lydia explained how Raymond justified his horrific actions. He told his children that he was doing this for their well-being. He also claimed that, as their father, he had the right to do so. In 1975, the Guardo family moved to the village of Coulombe, about 40 kilometers from Paris. At their new home, Raymond and Lucienne continued to abuse their children. The teenagers still did not attend school and had very little contact with the outside world. After returning to work, Raymond managed to get permission to park his printing van at a shopping center. To attract attention, he displayed photos of Lydia's burned legs on the van. Next to the photos, there were posters announcing that Lydia's injuries were due to the negligence of the authorities, and that they had yet to compensate her. Thus, he created the image of a father, calling for public attention and justice. When he felt that the photos alone weren't enough, Raymond forced Lydia to accompany him so that people could see her scars. He used the sympathy of bystanders to sell his goods and make money. Bruno was the first to try to stop the abuse from Raymond and Lucienne. Before that, Bruno, Nadia, and Lydia tried to escape, but they were caught and punished. Despite this, Bruno, who had suffered years of physical abuse, eventually managed to escape. According to some sources, Bruno contacted the authorities to report his family's problem. However, the authorities did not take his claims seriously. Meanwhile, his younger sisters, Nadia and Lydia, continued to suffer from Raymond's behavior. As they grew older, their bodies began to change. Noticing this, Raymond bandaged his daughters' chests with elastic bandages, making it difficult for them to breathe. The bandages eventually became tattered and dirty, as he did not allow them to be removed for months. He did not want anyone other than himself to touch his daughters. Years later, Bruno returned to rescue his sister Nadia, who was now an adult. He successfully saved her, but Lydia remained in danger. Raymond confined her to the dark, damp attic, where he abused her multiple times a day. She felt betrayed by her siblings for leaving her behind. She tried to escape from home several times, but Raymond spread rumors that she was mentally ill. So every time she tried to contact the authorities, they immediately brought her back home. After another escape attempt, Raymond even chained her up to keep her from fleeing again. When Lydia turned 18, Raymond decided it was time for her to have children. He was so determined to make this happen that after each intimate encounter, he would tie her legs together to supposedly increase the chances of her getting pregnant. At 19, she became pregnant for the first time, and for almost the entire 9 months of her pregnancy, she was kept on a leash. This was to prevent her from having an abortion. She gave birth to her first child on December 8, 1982. Despite becoming a mother, Lydia continued to try to escape, but Raymond caught her repeatedly and punished her harshly. On one occasion, he locked her in the attic for 6 months. During this time, she suffered abuse from Raymond and Lucienne, who often used kitchen utensils as weapons. The only companions she had were rats. She went on to have 5 more children between 1986 and 1996. Her youngest child, a boy named Rudy, is not Raymond's but someone else's, conceived while she was trying to escape. Raymond took great pride in his children, who initially did not even know who their real mother was. Neighbors, grocery store owners, and authorities representatives all came to congratulate him on having a large family and pay their respects. Every time Lydia was ready to give birth, Raymond would take her to a hospital outside the border. There, with threats to kill her, he would force her to say that he was her husband and the father of her children. He was skilled at manipulating and she felt powerless to resist him. It all ended in 1999. Raymond, who was diabetic, began to suffer serious health issues due to his neglect of his well-being. One day, his condition deteriorated, resulting in the amputation of several toes on his left foot. After the surgery, he continued to ignore the doctor's advice, and his health condition worsened. One day, Lydia visited Raymond in the hospital and learned that he had died the night before from a pulmonary embolism. This news brought her to tears, as she seemed to forget all the pain he had caused her. Before the death of the man who had abused her for a long time, she could not understand why she felt so sad. As Lydia left the hospital, she recalled how Raymond once forced her to promise that she would end her life immediately after his death. Years of his control had deeply affected her mindset. She walked to the nearest bridge and, in a moment of despair, jumped into the river. After she fell, she lost consciousness. Then, rescuers had pulled her from the water. In that moment, she realized that the horrors of her past were finally behind her. Thus, the 28-year saga of bullying, sexual assault, and imprisonment ended. She was free at last. After Lydia was released, she faced many challenges. As an illiterate and unemployed young woman, she needed to rebuild her life. She also had to reconnect with her children, who had been raised by Raymond and Lucienne without any contact with her. Fortunately, after years of neglecting the issue, the authorities began to support her. Initially, she was allowed to stay in the house where she had been held captive, although she was too afraid to go into the attic, the site of her abuse. Lydia's stepmother, Lucienne, who was 68 at the time, went to trial in 2007. She received a 3-year suspended sentence for failing to stop the crimes committed by Raymond. In 2008, this sentence was appealed and increased to 4 years probation. Lydia bravely shared her story with everyone. Despite still being illiterate, she collaborated with journalists and writer Jean-Michel Radem to publish a book about her difficult journey to freedom. In her book, Lydia criticized many government agencies. According to her, During the days when she escaped, they made her fall back into a bad situation without trying to understand the situation. She was especially critical of her stepmother, Lucienne, who not only ignored her suffering, but also actively participated in the physical abuse. She also criticized Bruno, Nadia, and medical workers who treated her injuries from burns, bruises, and cuts. She claims that medical staff ignored the obvious signs of her mistreatment and chose to remain uninvolved. Additionally, she criticizes her neighbors for not contacting any social services despite hearing the daily screams of children. Finally, Lydia expressed her disappointment with the French justice system for going easy on Lucienne. After publishing her book, the public became aware of the horrors she endured. Though some people advised her against sharing her story, she firmly believes that victims of such crimes should share their experiences, as it may help protect others. After gaining her freedom, Lydia met Sylvain Skurla. He seemed to come into her life to help heal her from the pain she had suffered. Shortly after they met, they got married and had 2 children. She expressed that she found hope in her husband and began to embrace life again. She participated in several media interviews and documentaries about her experiences, with Sylvain always by her side. However, the indelible traces of her time in captivity still remained in her heart. The scars on her body were a reminder of her past and the struggles she had gone through. With the help of a lawyer, Lydia appealed to the Judicial Commission for compensation. In her appeal, she detailed the torture and abuse she endured from Raymond and Lucienne, as well as her lack of access to education, which hindered her ability to find work. Additionally, she was not registered in the Social Security system because she could not write, preventing her from completing necessary forms. She also mentioned that burns she suffered as a child resulted in a degree of disability. Therefore, it was essential for Lydia to achieve several goals. First, to have her status as a victim recognized. Second, to receive financial assistance from the state to buy a home, ensuring she would never return to the place where she was tortured. On November 16, 2009, the Victims' Compensation Commission awarded Lydia over $100,000 in compensation. Her children, whom she had with Raymond, also received financial support. It was reported that they all found stable jobs, rebuilt their lives, and started their own families. Now, at 61 years old, Lydia has had a long and challenging journey to achieve a happy life. She needed specialized treatment for her emotional and physical scars for many years. However, with Sylvain's support, she was able to begin again. Despite everything she has gone through, she remains a strong and cheerful woman. Later, Lydia re-established communication with Bruno and Nadia. However, she admits that she still feels anger towards Bruno for not taking her with him. Detectives. Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Catherine Pileggi. Ronald Vinci was born on August 16, 1940, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and he showed a passion for business from an early age. In his 20s, he started his first business by renting a space on the Pacific Coast in San Diego to sell Honda motorcycles. His small shop eventually grew into one of the largest Honda dealerships in California. Ronald's success continued as he opened several more car dealerships, steadily increasing his earnings. People who worked for him often described him as determined and strong-willed, as well as a demanding employer. Ronald was previously married to a woman named Pamela, and they had a son named Carrie. Their marriage lasted for several years, but eventually ended in divorce. After the divorce, he started living a luxurious lifestyle, spent all money on luxury items. He passionate about collecting airplanes and helicopters, and even purchased a large hangar to store his collection. Ronald lived in a large house in Rancho Santa Fe, California. He tried very hard to get permission from the county commission to build a helipad on his land, even though his neighbors were against it. This has allowed him to could easily travel to work by helicopter directly from his home. He also had helicopter pads on the roofs of his car dealerships, which made his helicopter travel even more convenient. In 1990, 50 years old, Ronald Vinci met 34 years old Catherine Pileggi in a surprising setting, on a plane. Catherine was working as a flight attendant at the time. She grew up in a rural part of Georgia. As a young woman, she participated in beauty pageants, where she won people over with her charm and bright smile. Her beauty and friendly nature attracted many admirers. After completing her studies, Catherine worked for many years as a laboratory technician at a veterans hospital. However, she always wanted more from life and had aspirations beyond her job. In 1980, Catherine made a major career shift by leaving her job at the hospital to become a flight attendant with Delta Airlines, where she earned $20,000 a year. She enjoyed her new role, which involved attending to passengers and serving meals. Catherine has some helpful tips, like using coffee grounds to eliminate odors and a trick for cleaning stains off airplane seats. In 1990, 10 years after beginning her career as a flight attendant, Catherine had a fateful encounter on a flight. She met Ronald Vinci, a millionaire. He was immediately attracted to her charm and radiant smile. Despite the age difference of up to 14 years, this couple started dating. Catherine then left her job as a flight attendant and moved into Ronald's luxurious house in California. Together, they shared a passion for traveling, with Aspen, Colorado, being one of their favorite getaway destinations. Ronald and Catherine were together for 10 years, but he never proposed to her. Eventually, they broke up, and Catherine moved to Florida to find a new partner and a new beginning. In April 2001, at 45 years old, she started dating 63 years old Dilio Carano, a financially successful insurance agent. They met through friends. Catherine shared with Dilio her past unhappy relationship with Ronald, described it as a period of suffering and unhappiness. He insulted her, he also heavy drinking, and openly discussed his extramarital affairs with other women. She had endured this for 10 years, hoping Ronald would propose, but he never did. Unlike Ronald, Dilio quickly proposed to Catherine, and they got married in May 2001, just 1 month after meeting. Catherine was happy with the marriage new, and after their wedding, Dilio and Catherine moved in together in Miami Beach, Florida. Dilio describes that when she first got married, Catherine had a very gentle, calm personality, spoke little and ate very moderately. She also had a deep fear of water. She couldn't bathe in the ocean or river and would experience extreme anxiety when entering the water. A few months into their marriage, Dilio noticed a significant change in Catherine's behavior. She increasingly asked him for money more, asking for money to buy clothes and gifts, and often compared him to her friends' generous husbands. Dilio estimated that Catherine was taking about $55,000 from him each month. She claimed it was for educational expenses but never showed any receipts or proof. After enduring this financial burden for a few months, Dilio realized he had rushed into the marriage and wanted a divorce. With no children or shared property, the separation was relatively uncomplicated. Court documents indicated that Dilio had a net worth of $4.5 million, whereas Catherine had only $8,000 in her accounts. As Catherine was preparing to leave Dilio's house, she felt sad and hopeless, expressing that she didn't see the point of living, couldn't succeed in anything, and that her life had no meaning. 2005 saw millionaire Ronald make a big change in his life by moving to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. His friends persuaded him that Florida was appealing due to its good weather and low taxes. By then, Ronald had already sold his car dealerships and amassed a lot of wealth. In Fort Lauderdale, he purchased a luxurious fourth-floor apartment and started enjoying his new home. In the same year, Ronald rekindled his relationship with Catherine, a flight attendant he had dated before. Catherine then moved into Ronald's apartment. Interestingly, Catherine's former husband, Dilio, also lived in the same building, but 30 floors below. Dilio couldn't understand why Catherine had come back with the millionaire she had once called a monster. As Ronald and Catherine's relationship progressed, she dreamed of marrying him. Neither Ronald or Catherine need to go to work, led a life of leisure. Over time, Ronald and Catherine's differences became more evident. Ronald was obese and enjoyed indulging in rich foods, while Catherine ate sparingly and weighed only 42 kilograms. Ronald loved lively parties, whereas Catherine preferred staying at home, absorbed in crime stories. She rarely wore dresses, choosing shorts and sneakers for her daily wear. She and Ronald often traveled together, crossing the sea by boat and visiting the Caribbean islands by air. Catherine's diary shows that she was very afraid of the sea and describes how Ronald always encouraged her to overcome this phobia. Her decision to join him on these expeditions, despite her fears, proving that Ronald is very good at convincing her to do what he wants, and he can also be very firm when telling her to face her own worries. Despite his substantial wealth, but Ronald preferred socializing with friends at affordable bars along the Fort Lauderdale waterfront, where he would often order inexpensive tacos and potent drinks. He was known for being the center of attention, frequently flirting with women, but also jokingly acknowledging that his charm had worn off. The couple's home often hosted gatherings. On these occasions, Ronald would drink a lot of wine and speak more frankly. He would sometimes insult Catherine in front of their friends, claiming she owed everything to him. However, Catherine remained composed and quietly meeting Ronald's demands by serving drinks, snacks, and attending to his friends. For 5 years, the millionaire Ronald hesitated to propose to Catherine. By 2010, Ronald began telling friends he wanted to end their relationship and find a younger partner. In early 2011, Ronald was hospitalized with severe intestinal issues, likely due to long-term alcohol abuse. Doctors attributed his illness to his drinking habits, but Ronald noted a recent change in the taste of his food. A friend jokingly suggested, "Maybe Catherine tried to poison you." Ronald dismissed the joke without much thought. In reality, he had been neglecting his health, with excessive drinking and taking too many pills in an attempt to relax and sleep better, which was affecting his well-being. In June 2011, Ronald bought a new waterfront home in Fort Lauderdale, valued at $3 million, conveniently located near where his yacht was docked. At 70 years old, Ronald planned to enjoy his remaining years in this comfortable house. He anticipated visits from his only son, Carrie, and his grandson. Ronald often joked about Carrie's job as a waiter, humorously suggesting that Carrie was impatiently waiting for his passing. The gardener of Ronald called 911 on the afternoon of June 28, 2011, to report an incident involving his employer, Ronald. When the police arrived, they found the lifeless body of Ronald in a guest room. Shockingly, his body had been carefully wrapped in plastic bags, tightly sealed with tape, and placed in a sleeping bag. Inside this sleeping bag were also soiled sheets, and on them was a substance that looked like wet dirt, which was later identified as coffee grounds. Upon further investigation, a slashed mattress was discovered under the blanket on the bed. The gardener informed the police that, according to Catherine, Ronald had fallen down the stairs, suffered a head injury, and subsequently died. However, the officers suspected that his death was not accidental. During the interrogation, the gardener shockingly narrated the incident leading up to the discovery of Ronald's lifeless body. According to his testimony, Catherine had called him late at night, urgently asking him to go to Ronald's residence. Upon arriving in the morning, he encountered the eerie scene of Ronald's lifeless body, tightly wrapped in a sleeping bag in one of the guest rooms. Catherine, upset and crying, begged the gardener to help her bury Ronald. She explained that Ronald had always wanted to be buried at sea after he died. To fulfill this wish, she bought a blue container for Ronald's body, planning to take it out to sea on his yacht. Catherine had already brought the container home and put it in the garage before the gardener informed the authorities. After a detailed examination, the medical examiner uncovered gruesome details. Ronald Vinci, aged 70, was found with 9 stab wounds to his chest and neck, evidence of hammer blows to his head, and a fatal gunshot wound to the head. On the evening of June 27, Ronald's friends visited his home. Catherine prepared the meal, and he served drinks. During the meet, Ronald mentioned that his passport and one of his pistols were missing. At dinner, Ronald complained that the food tasted unusually bitter. Surprisingly, Ronald, who was known for staying up late, said he wasn't feeling well and went to bed as early as 7:30 p.m. His friends found his early bedtime unusual and eventually left his house. Catherine, 54, was questioned a few hours later and gave a detailed confession. She explained that around 1 a.m. on June 28, a drunken Ronald woke up and started verbally insulting her. The situation got worse, and then he chased her down the stairs, stumbled, and fell, hitting his head hard. Catherine said she helped him up and took him to a guest bedroom on the first floor. Then she cleaned the blood stains on the stairs. A few hours later, she checked on Ronald in the guest bedroom and found him asleep with a loaded gun on the nightstand. Fearing Ronald meant to kill her, Catherine, in a state of panic and desperation, grabbed the gun and fatally shot him in the head. During the interrogation, Catherine admitted that she had been really scared and angrier than she had ever been, feeling as if her soul had left her body. After the shooting, she continued to inflict numerous additional wounds on Ronald with a knife and a hammer. Then, she wrapped his body in a bag and attempted to hide the evidence. She called the gardener, realizing she couldn't get rid of the body by herself. Surveillance camera photos showed Catherine buying a large blue container at a hardware store after the murder, intending to use it to dispose of Ronald's body in the ocean. Furthermore, a gun matching the one used to shoot Ronald was found in Catherine's car, with her fingerprints on it. Her Bentley also contained a knife, cut-up pieces of a mattress, clothing, and rubber gloves, all stained with Ronald's blood. Catherine was charged with first-degree murder and was arrested and detained. It was revealed that a month before the murder, in May, Catherine was involved in a legal issue. Her sister had accused her of borrowing money and refusing to pay it back. Catherine claimed the money was a gift and refused to return it. On May 17, the court ruled in favor of Catherine in this dispute. Ronald's neighbors reported hearing screams from the Ronald house on the night of the crime. Additionally, a witness saw a white car with a large trailer near home in the early morning, which belonged to the gardener. Ronald's friends mentioned that he had wanted to end his relationship with Catherine for some time. The couple had not been intimate for months and even slept in separate rooms in their large house. Just weeks before the tragedy, Ronald tried to give Catherine $1 million through one of his employees, asking her to leave his house permanently. Prosecutors believed that Catherine's main motive was the fear of losing her wealthy partner. However, Catherine's defense claimed that she had been a victim of severe abuse during her relationship with Ronald and acted in self-defense. Questions were raised about why Catherine didn't report to the police right away, why she didn't tell the truth, and why she stayed with him for years despite the alleged abuse. In court, some of Catherine's relatives supported her, and a court psychiatrist noted signs of domestic violence. However, none of Ronald's close friends could verify any abuse in their relationship. They described Catherine as calm and mentioned she never complained about her life. During the trial, Catherine made a startling accusation, claiming Ronald was responsible for the sudden death of her younger sister Angela in December 2009, 3 years earlier. Catherine, Ronald, and Angela went on a Caribbean Sea cruise. Angela, who had been battling substance abuse, drank too much at a party and became very ill, suffering from intense convulsions. Catherine tried to save her sister by giving her artificial respiration, but sadly, Angela's heart stopped, and she passed away. It was later revealed that Ronald had given Angela some pills on the cruise's first evening, supposedly to help her relax. Catherine strongly believed these pills contributed to her sister's death. In 2014, a jury found Catherine Pileggi guilty of murdering Ronald Vinci, and she was sentenced to 25 years in prison. She is currently serving her sentence at the Eliel Correctional Institution in Marin County, Florida, with a potential release date set for January 2034, when she will be 77 years old. Ronald, a successful and wealthy man, experienced a tragic end because of his ill-fated relationship with Catherine, a quiet and unassuming flight attendant. Despite his many wise decisions in life, but this relationship proved to be a fatal mistake for the millionaire. Crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Diana Duva. Diana Duva was born in 1988 in Moldova. When she was 13, she moved to the United States to join her mother, who had immigrated earlier, married an American, and helped Diana relocate. They settled in Vero Beach, a resort town in sunny Florida, known for its white sandy beaches and warm Atlantic waters. At first, Diana didn't speak any English, but then she quickly enrolled in a local school. She learned the language swiftly. Within just 2 months, she was speaking freely, and after a few years, her accent became very similar to other native speakers. Diana developed a good relationship with her stepfather, Will, who became like a second father to her. She also made friends easily, as she was sociable and approachable. After graduating, Diana was faced with the problem of choosing her future goals. Knowing she wanted to dedicate her life to helping others, she enrolled in a nursing program at college. In 2011, she earned her nursing degree and secured a job at the oncology department of the Sebastian River Medical Center. Here she is highly appreciated by everyone, and her dedicated care has received many compliments from patients. In 2012, Diana met 30-year-old Michael Jones at a local bar. Initially, they were just friends, but their relationship soon became romantic. Friends and family began to question whether their feelings for each other were genuine or if it was merely infatuation. Michael showed interest in Diana, while Diana simply accepted his flirtation without much enthusiasm. Although he worked in asset management at a bank and had graduated from a University of Miami law school, but Michael lacked a sense of security. He is always polite, neatly dressed, and comes from a good family. This makes him an ideal choice to build a family and live together. Because of this, a couple of months after they met, Diana moved into his apartment at his request. Their relationship started off warm and seemingly happy. They spent almost all their time together. However, this closeness eventually led to issues. Diana's friends noticed that she sometimes appeared restless in their company. It seemed as though she was trying to hide from Michael, avoiding letting him see her with her friends or even her car. Although Diana's friends sensed that something was wrong, but she did not share any details about her relationship, leading them to suspect that Michael may be limiting her communication with friends. Before the tragic incident, Diana had a disagreement with her boyfriend, Michael. On April 30, 2014, a neighbor called 911 after hearing them argue for about an hour. Michael was shouting loudly, but there were no signs of physical violence. Concerned that the situation could escalate, the neighbor requested police intervention. When officers arrived, Michael answered the door and explained that the noise was due to rough sex that Diana wanted to try. Diana, visibly upset in her pajamas, stood quietly with her eyes downcast and tears on her face, which the police noticed. She didn't speak up in front of Michael and insisted to the officers that everything was fine. However, before concluding their conversation, she asked the police to wait, gathered her belongings, said goodbye to Michael, and left with them to the station. Later, Diana confided in a friend that Michael had not only yelled at her that night but had attempted to control her for hours. When his efforts failed, he grabbed her by the throat and began to strangle her. Terrified, she feared for her life. Thankfully, the neighbor called the police when realized the situation was dangerous. At the police station, 26-year-old Diana chose not to report Michael's mistreatment behavior to the police. She felt that her relationship with Michael was over and believed she shouldn't worry about it. Although the police persuade Diana to write a statement in her defense, but she refuses because she doesn't want to ruin Michael's life. Diana decided move to live with her mother to distance herself from him. However, 32-year-old Michael continued to stalk her, sending texts and insisting on meetings as if nothing was wrong. On Thursday, June 19, 2014, Diana was out with friends but left to meet Michael. Her friends last saw her when she left a bar with him at 1:30 a.m. on June 20th. At 1:45 a.m., she texted her mother, Lena Andrews, to say she wouldn't be coming home. That was the last anyone heard from her. After that, she stopped communicating with her family and friends. Although Diana had previously had a strained relationship with Michael, witnesses said that they seemed to be enjoying each other's company that day and showed no signs of conflict. It appeared they had reconciled, but after her disappearance, some people recalled that she sometimes seemed upset when talking to him. Diana spoke to her mother, Lena, every day, so when her mother didn't hear from her and her calls went unanswered, her mother immediately grew concerned. This worry led her to imagine worst-case scenarios. She reached out to Diana's friends, but they didn't know her whereabouts either. When Diana still hadn't returned by the evening of June 20th, her mother contacted the police to express her concerns. The officers took Lena's statement and began an investigation. On June 21st, the police attempted to locate Diana by tracking her phone, but it was disconnected and useless. Their next step was to visit her ex-boyfriend Michael, who was believed to be the last person with Diana before she went missing. However, no one answered the door when the police arrived. He was not home, and all the witnesses, Diana's friends who were at the bar with her that night, were questioned simultaneously. But this led to conflicting stories, because they developed several different theories about what happened that evening. On the same day, the police obtained a warrant to search the apartment of Diana's boyfriend, Michael, but first, they needed to return to the station to complete the necessary paperwork. When the officers returned, they found Diana's mother and stepfather waiting in a car near the apartment complex. Lena Andrews, Diana's mother, was distraught. She was crying and desperate to get into the apartment to find her daughter. As time passed without any contact from her mother's anxiety grew. Lena was convinced that Michael was involved in Diana's disappearance. The police asked her when she last heard from her daughter. Lena revealed that at around 1:45 a.m., she received a message from Diana, which said she wouldn't be coming home. This message was written in Russian, the language they usually use to communicate, and it was significant because Michael did not speak Russian and could not have sent it. After Diana went missing, her mother, Lena, called Michael. He tried to reassure her that Diana was with him and that she was safe. However, when Lena asked to speak to Diana directly, Michael made excuses, claiming she was asleep and that he was not at home. His words sounded fake, and Lena didn't trust him. She insisted that Diana call her back as soon as Michael returned, as she was very worried. Instead, Michael stopped answering calls altogether. Lena began to suspect that Michael was involved in Diana's disappearance and might have harmed her. Desperate for help, she reached out to the police, who assured her they would do everything they could to find her daughter, Diana. The detectives received photographs taken by a friend Diana's on the night before she went missing. These images showed clear strangulation marks on her neck. These injuries occurred following an argument that a neighbor overheard. The friend had tried repeatedly to convince Diana to report Michael to the police, but she refused, asking her friend to help her collect her belongings as she believed the relationship was over. Afterwards, Diana moved in with her parents but chose not to inform them about the incident. Her mother remained unaware of the attack, thinking they had merely had some disagreements, although she did have her suspicions about Michael. Despite this, Michael did not leave Diana alone and began to harass her. He continued sending messages, as if he didn't understand that their relationship was really over. 48 hours after Diana disappeared, the police obtained a search warrant and entered Michael's apartment, hoping to find her or some evidence about her whereabouts. However, they did not locate any of her belongings or any clues. The next step was to search for Michael Jones. Witnesses reported that he showed up at work just 12 hours after Diana stopped communicating. He also withdrew $2,500 in cash from his bank account, claiming he was unwell and needed to leave. For several days, no one could locate Michael. His whereabouts were unknown. It appeared he had gone into hiding, raising suspicions about his involvement in the disappearance of Diana. Detectives began to delve deeper into Michael's background. They discovered that prior to the move to Vero Beach, he had been convicted of stalking his ex-girlfriend under serious circumstances. Investigators reviewed the details of that case. In 2012, when Michael lived near Fort Lauderdale, his ex-girlfriend reported him to the police. She claimed that after breaking up with him, he threatened to end his life. When this manipulation did not succeed, he physically attacked her. Michael used a gun in an attempt to force her to stay. His earlier girlfriends had managed to escape by calling the police. The ex-girlfriend filed a report against Michael, leading to his arrest. He cooperated with the investigation and confessed to his actions, including making threats of murder. Consequently, he received a suspended sentence of 5 years. Then, Michael was in a new relationship with Diana. He was restricted from leaving the Vero Beach area if no his supervisor's permission. However, he vanished, and the police were unable to locate him. He could have been detained for violating the terms of his suspended sentence. The parents of Diana were shocked to learn of Michael's suspended sentence. They had no idea their daughter was involved with a criminal who had a history of attacking and threatening former girlfriends. Meanwhile, detectives concentrated on Michael, believing he had more information than he shared with Diana's mother during their phone call. The police initiated a thorough analysis and tracking of signals from Michael's communications. They also placed Michael's and Diana's cars on a list of vehicles to be located. After reviewing cellular signals, they pinpointed Michael's phone to an area in Fort Pierce, about a 25-minute drive from Vero Beach. Patrols were dispatched to search for the cars of Michael and Diana, focusing on a gold Honda and a black Nissan. By the evening of the same day, they discovered Michael's car parked at the Hampton Inn Hotel near the communication tower. The police learned that Michael had checked into a room just 24 hours after Diana disappeared. Michael tried to keep his identity a secret while staying at a hotel, but he ended up leaving the information when he had to pay for the room at the front desk. The hotel management was told not to disclose that he was staying there for the next 2 nights. He also barred any phone calls to his room and turned off his own phone. When the police arrive, they believe they may find Diana alive, with her kidnapper, Michael, in the hotel room. After receiving the room key from the front desk, the police entered the room. Michael was shocked when he saw the police and immediately claimed he had no idea where Diana was. The detective pressed him to share any information he had, but he continued to deny everything. Since they couldn't gather any information, Michael was detained for violating his probation. Still, the detective had no leads on Diana's whereabouts or her car. It was discovered that during Michael's time on the run, he had been using a disposable phone, making it nearly impossible to trace his communications. The investigation continued as detectives identified the location where the disposable phone was purchased, the Wall store. They requested and reviewed the store's CCTV footage to find Diana or her vehicles. Despite the poor quality, they spotted a car similar to Diana's vehicle in the footage, which was recorded shortly before she was reported missing. In the video, Michael exits the car, makes a purchase at the store, and then drives away, while Diana is not seen. Although this did not provide any leads, it led the police to a more detailed analysis of phone calls, revealing that Michael occasionally used his main phone. He turned it on briefly before switching it off again. One of the phone's pings was detected near Melbourne, about an hour's drive from where Michael was hiding. Investigators alerted the local police to check this area. The Melbourne police joined the search for Diana's missing car, and their efforts paid off. Just 30 minutes later, they found Diana's car in the parking lot of a Florida Publix shopping center. Investigators quickly arrived to the scene after learning about the discovery. In June 2014, just 3 days after Diana went missing, state police found her body in the trunk of her own car. This led to the case being reclassified from a disappearance to a murder investigation. The autopsy revealed that Diana had been strangled and suffered blunt force trauma to her head, indicating she had been violently attacked before her death. It was widely believed that Michael was responsible for bringing her to that location. CCTV footage captured him driving her car, and his phone records showed he was in the area at the time. When investigators examined Michael's call history, they found that the only call he made while in the vicinity was to order a taxi. Around 8 a.m., he called for a ride and was picked up from a nearby parking lot. The taxi driver was found, and interrogation, he recognized Michael from a photo. The driver recalled that Michael was wearing a red hoodie and sat in the front passenger seat, where they chatted briefly. According to the driver, Michael claimed he had come with a friend, but after they had a fight, he left alone. 2 days after Diana's body was discovered, police gathered enough evidence to charge Michael Jones with the first-degree murder of Diana. However, Michael maintained his innocence, necessitating further investigation to establish his guilt. As the police investigated his background, they discovered that he did not fit the usual profile of a criminal. He was educated, intelligent, and held a respected job at a bank, making him a valued member of the community. Many people were skeptical about his capacity for murder. He frequently participated in local charity events and was an advocate for an organization working against domestic violence, where he had a positive reputation. Friends and co-workers praised him, claiming he was one of the most honest and trustworthy individuals they knew. They expressed that they trusted him as much as their own family members. The management at the banks where Michael worked regarded him as one of their best employees and a key team member. They received numerous letters of appreciation acknowledging his contributions. Since he started at the bank, Michael brought in many partners, leading to multimillion-dollar deals. While he enjoyed a good reputation in the bank, it was overshadowed by the fact that he was a convicted criminal serving a suspended sentence. Michael was a master manipulator, able to deceive not only ordinary people but also the bank's management, which had a security service that meticulously monitored employees. They were completely unaware of Michael's criminal past. As the police began to investigate him, they discovered that his history was filled with inconsistencies. Different people shared conflicting stories about him. Some claimed he was a former baseball player, others said he was an adopted child from a wealthy family, while some believed he had inherited a fortune and was raised in a family connected to a former U.S. president. They also believed that Michael lived in a luxurious penthouse and drove a Porsche, even though he himself had driven a Honda for 10 years. Although the investigation identified Michael's previous girlfriends and detectives spoke to them, police now saw a clear pattern in his behavior. At first, he seemed charming, like a prince on a white horse, winning the girls over with his best qualities. The girls were thrilled to be with someone so promising. However, over time, he revealed a darker side. He became controlling and jealous, dictating how they should interact with others and monitoring their communications. He manipulated multiple girlfriends simultaneously, maintaining these relationships for extended periods. Michael was not only a skilled manipulator but also a cruel individual and a pathological liar. Most of the girls were fortunate. They avoided persecution and found ways to break up with Michael without suffering serious consequences. Michael lied about being poor when he entered college, but in reality, he came from a wealthy family. His lies about his background grew more serious after his parents cut off their financial support. He attempted to manipulate them, but it was unsuccessful. While studying, he falsely claimed he was fighting cancer to gain sympathy from his classmates. But he couldn't provide any medical evidence to support his claims. The prosecution faced a difficult choice: pursue the death penalty or settle for life in prison. They did not consult Diana's mother about this decision. Choosing the death penalty was particularly risky. If even one juror disagreed, it could put the whole case in danger. Additionally, such cases can take years to resolve. However, Diana's mother was adamant that Michael should face the death penalty. Refusing to back down, the prosecutor stated his intention to seek capital punishment. In November 2019, Michael's trial began. The prosecution described his relationship with Diana as toxic, describing it as a cruel attempt at control that lasted around 6 months. The climax of this abuse was an attack on Diana. The prosecution presented clear evidence of Michael's aggressive behavior, including photos taken by a friend, which showed marks on Diana's neck. While the prosecution could not confirm the exact conversation between Diana and Michael at the bar that night, Diana's friend reported that she planned to end her relationship with Michael, but wanted to do so in a friendly manner to preserve their friendship. Afterward, Diana planned a short trip to visit a friend in a nearby city. She mentioned her plans to Michael, which likely angered him. Tragically, this led to her demise. Diana's body exhibited multiple injuries and bruises, indicating she had suffered severe abuse at Michael's hands. The prosecution argued that Michael took Diana to his home and assaulted her violently. He understood that if she managed to escape, she would probably go to the police, leading to a long prison sentence for him. So, he couldn't let her go. Michael killed Diana by strangling her, leaving characteristic handprints on her neck. Afterward, he placed her body in the trunk of his car and drove her out of town. He then took a taxi and hid in a hotel. Fortunately, he left behind clues that led to his capture and the resolution of the case. The forensic expert admitted that they couldn't determine the time of death accurately because the body had decomposed significantly in the heat, complicating the investigation. However, upon closer inspection of his apartment, small but distinct traces of blood were found in the garage. These traces were located where the sliding door meets the ground, suggesting that he loaded her body into the car at his home. The defense argued that the prosecution failed to clearly establish what happened in Michael's house, claiming that it was unreasonable to consider the murder premeditated and that the incident should be classified as an accident. The lawyer also presented strong arguments for a reduced sentence, such as the attitudes of neighbors, friends, and acquaintances towards Michael, along with Michael's good reputation at work. The court heard testimonies within a week. Afterward, the jury went to deliberate and reached a decision surprisingly quickly, in just 45 minutes. They unanimously found Michael Jones guilty of first-degree murder. However, the jury did not have a collective agreement on the verdict. Diana's mother, crying, confronted Michael and asked how he could kill someone he professed to love. Even so, Michael showed no remorse or emotion during the trial. Even as the court prepared to announce the verdict, he remained emotionless. The prosecution was greatly disappointed when Michael Jones received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Brittany McGlone. Brittany McGlone was born in 1987 to Gary and Patricia McGlone in Gordo, New Mexico. When she was young, the family moved to Winsport, a small town in northwest Texas with fewer than 4,000 residents. After the move, her parents divorced, and Brittany stayed with her mother. Her father later remarried and had 6 sons and 1 daughter. Brittany formed a close bond with her half-younger sister, Hope, who was 3 years younger. Although they lived in different states, the two sisters often talked on the phone and cherished spending time together during the holidays. Brittany was a kind, happy girl with a great sense of humor and an optimistic outlook on life. She helped her mother with housework, cared for her sick grandmother, and visited her father to help care for her half-siblings. Brittany graduated from high school in 2006 and worked 2 jobs at different stores. She intended to save money to attend nursing school. Unfortunately, her plans were cut short when she was tragically murdered. At the time, she was in a relationship with Jeff Stogner, her first love. However, Jeff had a history of using illegal drugs, and he was known for being rude, tough, and rebellious. Despite her family's concerns and her mother's warnings about dating someone like him, Brittany continued the relationship. Their relationship was often tumultuous, marked by frequent arguments, and Jeff subjected Brittany to both physical and emotional abuse. Brittany ended her relationship with Jeff in April 2007, but they stayed in touch. By May, they got back together, which upset her mother. On the morning of Friday, May 4, 2007, Brittany finished her shift early at 7 a.m. She informed her mother that she would go directly to Jeff's house to sleep after her night shift, as Jeff had requested her to come over right away. Normally, Brittany would come home first, shower, rest, and have lunch before visiting him. Patricia was surprised by the sudden change in her daughter's plans but accepted it. Brittany arrived at Jeff's house before 8 a.m., where his family was present, including his parents, siblings, and his sister's boyfriend, Chad Carr. Shortly after she arrived, Jeff's mother went to work, his siblings left with their children, and Jeff and his stepfather headed to the Dallas-Fort Worth area to pick up Brittany's grandparents. Brittany laid down to sleep, needing to rest before going to work. While she slept, her mother, Patricia, kept trying to call her, but Brittany didn't answer. After 8 a.m., Patricia assumed her daughter was still sleeping and didn't think much of it. Around 3 p.m., Jeff called Brittany's house. Patricia answered the phone and Jeff asked if Brittany was home. Patricia was surprised and replied that Brittany wasn't home. Worried, she hung up and started calling Brittany's cell phone, but all the calls went straight to voicemail. Despite trying several times, Brittany didn't answer. Patricia was confused and worried because her daughter wasn't answering her phone. Patricia called Jeff again, and he explained that Brittany had been at his house when he left and was sound asleep. He assured her that Brittany was probably still sleeping and hadn't heard the calls. Patricia then asked why he had invited Brittany over if he planned to leave, but Jeff didn't respond. As he arrived home, he spotted Brittany's car and reassured Patricia that she was with him. Feeling relieved, Patricia asks him to tell Brittany to call her mother when she wakes up. That day, Patricia did not receive any calls from Jeff or her daughter. Later, 2 police officers knocked on her door. When she answered, they inquired about someone named Brenda or Debbie. Patricia didn't recognize those names, so the officers left, leaving her feeling unsettled. Worried, she called the sheriff to find out why the police had visited and who they were looking for. The sheriff asked her to stay home and promised that they would return. Eventually, the police clarified that they had mixed up the names and informed Patricia that Brittany was dead. Her body had been taken to a funeral home. Shocked, Patricia tried to get more information from the officers, but they would not share any details. Immediately, she feared that Jeff had harmed her daughter. Determined to know the truth, she went to the funeral home to identify Brittany's body and learn what had happened. There, she discovered that her daughter had been brutally murdered in her sleep. Overwhelmed by the news, Patricia could only think about her warnings to her daughter to avoid dangerous people. Eventually, Patricia began pressing the police for answers about the events at Jeff's house and her daughter's death. Jeff reported that when he arrived home, he found her car still parked outside. He assumed she was still asleep. However, when Jeff entered his bedroom, he discovered a horrifying scene. Brittany, covered in blood, and lying motionless on the bed. He quickly called 911 to report what he had seen. Patricia did not believe the story and decided to call Jeff herself. While waiting for answers, she demanded to know the truth. Jeff repeated the same story to her. Patricia then asked why he hadn't called her immediately to inform her about the murder. He explained that he was afraid to share such alarming news. When the police arrived, they assured that they would notify the relatives of the victim. Brittany's family was devastated by the news. Forensic experts began investigating the crime scene. Even experienced police officers were shocked by the brazen murder, as they had never seen anything like it before. Blood was everywhere in the room, seeping through the mattress and spreading across the floor. Forensic experts collected DNA samples from the scene, but they could not find a murder weapon, nor any signs of forced entry. This suggested that Brittany had let the attacker into the house, or the door was unlocked. Jeff was unsure whether the door was actually closed. He speculated that they may have left the back door open, a common occurrence in their sleepy town. Her work clothes were neatly folded next to the bed, but her pajamas and underwear were missing. It was reported that the perpetrator had torn off her clothes and raped her. Brittany's autopsy revealed severe head injuries. The medical examiner determined that Brittany had been beaten to death, with the cause of death being blunt force trauma, possibly a crowbar. Since no defensive wounds were found on her body, it was suggested that Brittany had been asleep during the attack and was unable to defend herself. It was also confirmed that she had been raped. The crime was believed to have a sexual motive. Jeff's DNA was found at the crime scene because he lived in the house, where his family often visited him. His friends also frequently came over, leaving their DNA in his room. The presence of multiple DNA samples made the investigation more complicated, and Jeff became the main suspect. He and his father discovered the girl's body and were the last people to see her alive, leading police to have many questions for him. Jeff was taken to the station for questioning. He shared his background with the police and insisted he was not involved in the murder. However, he was arrested for a different offense because he was on parole and had violated its terms. At that time, he was not charged with Brittany's murder. Police interviewed Patricia's mother to gather information about Brittany's relationship with Jeff. She explained that they had only been dating for 6 months, during which time they often argued. Jeff sometimes used drugs, which caused him to distance himself from her. His mother did not approve of their relationship. At one point, the couple broke up, but they later reconciled because Brittany loved him deeply and felt she could not live without him. Their relationship was toxic and unhealthy. On Tuesday, May 8, 2007, Brittany's family chose not to have a closed casket for her funeral due to the severe injuries on her face. They kindly requested that Jeff and his family stay away from the ceremony, believing he was involved in her death. However, Jeff ignored this request and attended the funeral with his family. They were not allowed to attend the ceremony, leading to an argument between Jeff's family and Brittany's relatives. This behavior upset Brittany's family and made the ceremony worse. Jeff tried to share how he had trouble sleeping in the blood-soaked bed after Brittany's murder. Brittany's family was furious and believed he was involved in the case. However, Jeff was later cleared of all suspicion. He and his father passed a lie detector test, and his alibi was confirmed by witnesses, surveillance cameras, and cell phone records. Police discovered that Jeff's phone had connected to another cell tower and his image was captured on surveillance cameras at 2 gas stations. The exact time of the Brittany's death is unclear. According to the timeline, Brittany was killed during the 7 hours when Jeff was not at home. However, there were periods when Jeff's whereabouts were unknown. He could have returned home at any time to kill Brittany or may have killed her earlier in the morning before leaving to create an alibi. The mother was unable to reach her daughter by phone that morning but thought nothing of it, assuming Brittany was still asleep, though she might have already been dead. Additionally, it raised suspicions that Jeff stopped at 2 gas stations located next to each other. The family believed he did this to ensure at least one gas station's surveillance cameras captured him, providing a potential alibi. Because of this, they felt his alibi was unreliable. Jeff's behavior that day was odd to them, and they questioned why he suddenly called Brittany to his place early in the morning. Why would he want her to sleep alone at his house when he was leaving? She could have stayed at his house, and they could have met up later. That doesn't make sense. Plus, Brittany's family suspects others, especially Chad Carr, Jeff's sister's boyfriend. They were also in the house the morning of the murder. Chad and Jeff's sister were out somewhere together, but he has no alibi. Chad knew that Jeff's family often left the back door open, and that day he went home, showered, changed clothes, and then went back to Jeff's house. Why would he need to change clothes in broad daylight and he had never done so before? Most importantly, he had problems with the law. He was involved in robberies and had once attacked and severely beaten his ex-wife, which resulted in him serving 4 years in prison. At the time he was in prison, his wife had divorced him, so Brittany's family suspected that he was involved in the murder. Brittany's family asked the police to check on this guy, and he was summoned for questioning. Chad denied any involvement in the crime and was offered a polygraph test, which he agreed to take but failed. However, this failure was not considered evidence, so he was released. At that time, the police had no evidence against Jeff and Chad, and they were not even regarded as suspects. Chad's ex-wife, Britt, contacted the police, alleging that he had abused her. It was revealed that in 2006, he had been released from prison and asked Britt to bring their child to him. She complied, but Chad reacted violently, attacking her with a baton, kidnapping their daughter, and raping Britt. She later filed a complaint, which resulted in Chad being imprisoned for 8 years. After Brittany's murder, Britt viewed Chad as cruel and aggressive, believing he was capable of killing. Brittany's family overlooked Jeff's strange social media posts and inappropriate jokes about murders, which seemed to mock Brittany's memory. It raised suspicion when Jeff's family moved to another house and the murder scene was demolished. Brittany's family thought this indicated they were hiding something, leading them to suspect the demolition was a way to obscure the truth. There were allegations that Jeff had been dealing drugs from that house. It's possible Brittany discovered this or threatened to report him, which might have made her a target for elimination as a witness. Brittany's family called for justice from the police, but the investigation stalled and the case went cold. Initially, the police mishandled the evidence collection at the crime scene and allowed Jeff's family to enter the house, contaminating the area. They also failed to investigate around the house or search the nearby lake for the murder weapon. In 2017, the sheriff and his deputy were charged with falsifying evidence and providing false testimony, leading to their removal from office. In December 2021, a new sheriff was elected. He met with Brittany's family and assured them that he would do his best to hold the criminal accountable for his actions. The new sheriff announced that his team was engaging with several parties involved in the case. The Brittany family felt hopeful that the criminals would be caught and punished. The sheriff and his deputies maintained regular communication with the family, keeping them updated on the investigation. Although Jeff's home, where the crime occurred, had been torn down, the sheriff stated that evidence, including blood stains and DNA, was collected on the first day of the investigation. He planned to re-examine this evidence using modern technology to find answers. The sheriff also intends to re-interview Jeff's entire family and other people involved and seek assistance from local residents. At the time, Jeff was not considered a suspect and was actively cooperating with the police, providing his alibi. Chad was released from prison in November 2020 after serving time again. On September 1, 2022, he was arrested in Dallas, 15 years after the murder of Brittany McGlone. He faces charges for her murder, and the death penalty is a potential outcome. Police collected evidence from Chad's home, including several items such as a pair of white shorts with blood stains, a gray ski mask, and 2 pairs of women's panties. The police chief stated that both old and new evidence contributed to Chad's recent arrest. Throughout the investigation, police always determined that Chad was the perpetrator, as all the evidence pointed to him. However, the specifics of this evidence have not been revealed. Chad is currently in jail awaiting trial and is facing the death penalty. Jeff maintains that he was not involved in Brittany's murder and believes that the accusations have destroyed his life. Many people view him as a murderer, which he finds hard to cope with. His personal life is challenging. He divorced his wife because he cannot move on from Brittany. However, Brittany's family does not believe Jeff's claims. They describe him as a narcissist who only loves himself and think that he tries to gain sympathy by portraying himself as a victim. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Yoselin Ortega. Yoselin Ortega was born in 1962 in the Dominican Republic as the youngest of 8 siblings. Her family was relatively wealthy, and her parents owned a wine cellar. She did not encounter any difficulties until her teens, when a sister of hers suddenly died from a brain aneurysm. This thing deeply affected her. She did not leave the house for about a year and suffered from depression, missing her sister. During this time, she began hearing voices urging her to harm others, but she confided only in a few sisters, asking them to keep it secret. For many years, almost no one knew about this, not even her parents, who noticed some odd behavior but attributed it to grief and depression over her sister's death. Yoselin continued with her life, resisting the voices and not harming anyone. After finishing school, she attended university to study accounting. Despite her struggles, but she graduated in 1985. She then decided to move to New York, where one of her sisters lived. After that, she and her sister started living together, working together to cover expenses. Eventually, Yoselin met a man and started a relationship with him, marrying in 1995. The following year, they had a son named Jesus. However, after their child was born, the relationship between the couple became worse even though they tried to save it. In 1999, Yoselin and her husband are divorced, leaving her alone with a young child in New York, where the cost of living is very high. Faced with a lot of financial difficulties, so she decided to send her 4-year-old son, Jesus, for grandparents to take care of. Then she returned to the United States, where she can earn more money for herself and her child. Yoselin lived with her sister, and they supported each other by working together in a factory and taking part-time cleaning jobs. She kept in regular contact with her parents and son, calling them almost every day. In 2004, Yoselin became a U.S. citizen. After saving enough money, Yoselin returned to her homeland in March 2008 to raise her son. Things were going well until April 2008, when her best friend Celine tragically ended her life on a balcony. This news plunged Yoselin into depression, making her extremely paranoid. She did not leave the house and forbade her son to go to school. Whenever she heard noises outside, like a dog barking, she will hide under the bed and force her son to hide with her. As time passed, the situation improved. Yoselin regained her composure, and her fears and worries faded away. She returned to work in the USA with her sister, leaving her son with her parents. Eventually, she met the affluent Krim family, who were looking for a nanny for their children. Kevin Krim, the head of the family, was a Harvard graduate, and his wife, Marina, graduated from the University of Southern California. They met at an Italian restaurant through friends and immediately hit it off. They got married in 2003. Marina and Kevin's first daughter, Lucia, was born in 2006, followed by their second daughter, Nessie, in 2009. When Marina was pregnant with her third child, the family relocated from California to New York due to Kevin's job. He was offered the position of Chief Executive Officer at Symbian. Previously, he worked in senior roles at Bloomberg and Yahoo. The family settled in one of Manhattan's finest neighborhoods, Upper West Side. Marina stays at home to do housework and take care of the children, but she later started a blog to document their daily lives as a personal hobby. The second daughter, Nessie, had health issues that required Marina's full attention. As a result, Marina began to have difficulty doing housework and had no time to take her children to extra classes like dancing or swimming. Additionally, she was in the late stages of pregnancy, making it difficult for her to manage anything. Her husband, Kevin, was frequently away on business trips and couldn't assist her, so they decided to hire a nanny for help. Marina and Kevin began searching for a nanny. At the dance studio Marina attended with her children, they met Jocelyn's sister, Celia, housekeeper for another family. Celia introduced Jocelyn to them and sent her younger sister's resume. Impressed by Jocelyn's experience with children, they contacted Jocelyn's previous employer and received a positive recommendation. Then, they invited Jocelyn for an interview and immediately liked her. She was sociable, smiling, and friendly. They decided to hire her as a part-time nanny. She came to their home after lunch and helped with the children until the evening. However, the entire story about the resume was fabricated. Jocelyn has no experience with childcare, unlike her sister, Celia. However, she needed a good job, and when an opportunity arose to earn a decent salary of $500 a week, Celia helped her create a resume. Despite her lack of experience, but Jocelyn excelled in the job. She got along well with the children, and there were no issues for about 2 years. Unfortunately, the Krim family could not have anticipated the tragedy that followed. Jocelyn appeared to be a kind and trustworthy woman, and the Krims believed their children were completely safe with her. This gave Marina free time to teach at a drawing school, her hobby, and continue blogging. The nanny Jocelyn treated the family's children as if they were her own, often joking that she had not one son, but 4 children. The children loved her in return, giving her drawings and becoming attached to her. The youngest son of the Krim family, Leo, couldn't even fall asleep without her. Marina was very cautious. She rarely left Jocelyn alone with the children, she doing so only in cases of extreme necessity. Usually, Marina was always with the children, and Jocelyn just assisted. Even when Marina left the house, she asked her relatives to keep an eye on Jocelyn. According to Celia, Jocelyn was happy with her job as a nanny. She earned a good salary for part-time work and received gifts, including expensive ones. Krim family even bought her plane tickets to the Dominican Republic so she can visit loved ones. They became so close to Jocelyn that in February 2012, they all went on vacation together to the Dominican Republic. There, they met Jocelyn's family, spent a night at her family's house, enjoyed the wonderful vacation, and gave her family many gifts. Krim family also helped Jocelyn's grown-up son, Jesus, move to New York to be closer to his mother. They bought 17-year-old Jesus an iPad for school, let him stay with them, and paid him well just for walking their 2 dogs. Although he had graduated from school in his home country, but Jesus had to repeat the 11th grade in the US under a different American program at a regular school. When he wasn't accepted, Jocelyn had to arrange for him to attend a private school, which was expensive for her. She was very protective of her son and didn't let him go outside unless necessary. She made him hide under the bed during loud noises, as he did in childhood, and when he went to school, she would to follow him secretly to ensure nothing happened to him. In April 2012, Jocelyn faced difficulties when she was evicted from the Bronx apartment she shared with her son. She had invested heavily in the housing, but the landlord evicted them. She was forced to move back in with her 3 sisters and their families, totaling 6 more people. The living situation was overcrowded and cramped. Jocelyn asked the Krim family for a raise so she could afford separate housing. They agreed to pay her more if she also cleaned their house for 5 hours a week. She accepted, but for the first time in a long time, she again had financial difficulties because she had to raise her son and pay the rent alone. Despite a decent income, her expenses were still too high. This situation stressed Jocelyn to sell jewelry and cosmetics to neighbors for extra money. Initially, she was successful, but when she gave cosmetics to a friend to sell, the friend disappeared without paying her back. This left she with a significant debt, forcing her to take on more work. She started cooking rice and preparing chicken dishes to sell. The extra workload exhausted her. She complained to her loved ones, saying the Krim family should pay her to babysit, not to clean and do housework. She felt that their family was so rich, they should just give her a raise without additional duties, and she was angry with them. Marina knew that Jocelyn needed money and began introducing her to friends and acquaintances to work as a nanny. When new clients started reaching out, Jocelyn became upset with Marina. She felt that taking on more work would leave her with less time to spend with her son. Her frustration grew daily. During these months, she lost a lot of weight and appeared tired and worn out. Once a cheerful and happy woman, she became tired and disillusioned with life. She began to have hallucinations, had trouble sleeping. Celia noticed that she started praying frequently at home, reading religious magazines because she saw demons, and began visiting a psychologist. But she hid all this from the Krim family, fearing she might lose her good job. On October 25, 2012, Jocelyn arrived at the Krim family's house at 3 p.m. Marina met Jocelyn at the door, as she was leaving with Nessie for a swimming lesson. She instructed Jocelyn to pick up Lucia from school and take Lucia's to ballet. Then Jocelyn had to go home to put Leo to bed. In the end, they planned to meet at Lucia's ballet class and return home together. Jocelyn and Leo picked up Lucia from school as planned but did not take Lucia to ballet lessons. Instead, they went for a walk in the park, ate ice cream, and then returned home. That day, Jocelyn first spoke to the janitor of the apartment building where the Krim family lived. She asked if Marina had returned home, but the concierge said no. Then, she, Lucia and Leo took the elevator to the apartment and ran into a neighbor. Just half an hour later, a tragedy occurred. Around 5 p.m., Marina and Nessie went to Lucia's ballet class to pick up Lucia. Little girl was supposed to be there with Jocelyn. However, Marina found out that little girl did not come to class. Concerned, Marina rushed back to her Upper West Side apartment in New York. On the way, she tried calling Jocelyn, but Jocelyn didn't answer. Marina initially thought no one was home and that Jocelyn might be out with the children in the park. She went to the concierge to ask if he had seen Jocelyn and the children. The concierge told her that they had recently returned to the building and they may be in the apartment. Marina and Nessie went back to the apartment and began to search each room. When Marina entered the bathroom, she was met with a horrific sight. Her 2 children, Lucia and Leo, lay lifeless on the floor, covered in blood, and Jocelyn sitting next to them holding a bloody kitchen knife. Seeing Marina's reaction, Jocelyn stabbed herself in the throat twice. Marina got scared. She rushed out of the apartment with Nessie, screaming. The neighbors heard Marina's heart-wrenching screams, and the building's security calmed her down before calling 911 and emergency services. When the New York Police Department officers arrived, they found a horrific scene in the Krim family's apartment. Two small children, Lucia and Leo, lay in the bathtub with knife wounds, Marina beside them, overcome with grief and horror. The nanny Jocelyn lay on the floor, bleeding and in critical condition. Doctors found Jocelyn, Lucia, and Leo still alive and rushed them to the hospital. Tragically, Lucia and Leo did not survive. They were pronounced dead on arrival. Lucia was 6 years old, and her brother Leo was 2 years old. The nanny, 50 years old Jocelyn Ortega, survived. She was put into a coma and underwent surgery. She had cut her hands and neck with such force that she broke her cervical vertebrae. Marina was in shock and unable to provide any information to the police, so they gave her a sedative. Her husband, Kevin, who was returning from a business trip, received a frantic voicemail from Marina, but couldn't understand what she was saying. He only knew that something was wrong with the children. When he arrived at the airport, police met him and delivered the devastating news. He fainted and was given first aid before being taken to the hospital to be with Marina. They were overcome with grief and struggled to comprehend how their nanny, who had been caring for their children for 2 years and was considered a member of the family, could commit such a heinous act. A neighbor reported seeing Jocelyn with Lucia and Leo in the elevator just 30 minutes before the tragedy. Lucia and Leo seemed happy and playful, while Jocelyn appeared emotionless and detached. However, the neighbor didn't think much of it, as Jocelyn had behaved similarly in the past. Other nannies in the area, who often helped each other, barely knew Jocelyn, as Jocelyn was very withdrawn and didn't communicate with anyone. They considered her strange. The autopsy revealed Lucia and Leo suffered a horrific death, with nearly beheaded bodies. Lucia suffered more than 30 stab wounds and cuts, indicating that little girl had fought fiercely for her life, leading to severe blood loss. Her younger brother, Leo, had 5 stab wounds to the neck, and his throat was cut from behind. There was no doubt Jocelyn was responsible for the murder. Detectives began to investigate her background in detail. Jocelyn was hospitalized for a week and she was saved. When she regained consciousness, she could only communicate through gestures. She only asked about her family, but she said nothing about the murdered children or the Krim family. Later, when Jocelyn could speak, detectives interviewed her on November 3rd. She did not confess to the murder, but she expressed feelings of resentment towards Krim's family because they often reprimanded her. She refused to have a lawyer during the interrogation. She said she was in the bathroom at the time of the incident, and she denied responsibility for causing the injuries that led to the deaths of Lucia, 6, and Leo, 2. In addition, she said that the children's mother, Marina, knew why this happened. On November 13th, Jocelyn Ortega was charged with the first-degree murder of the children, but she denied her guilt and hired a lawyer. As New York had abolished the death penalty, so she faced life imprisonment. Jocelyn was given a psychiatric examination and psychiatrists found her to be sane and able to appear in court. During the proceedings, Jocelyn declined a plea bargain from the prosecution, which offered her a 30-year sentence in exchange for a guilty plea, allowing her potential release at around 80 years of age. However, she chose not to explain the incident and motives behind the crime, opting instead to be represented by a lawyer. The lawyer argued that her actions were due to her mental illnesses. She broke down and lost control when she harmed Lucia and Leo. 2 psychiatrists for Jocelyn testified that she heard voices, including satanic ones, telling her to harm herself and the children. They stated that she had experienced hallucinations since her teenage years in the Dominican Republic, but her condition had not been diagnosed or treated. Before she was arrested for murder, Several family members and friends noted that Jocelyn's behavior had changed in the weeks leading up to the crime. She said she saw demons and shadows of people haunting her. She frequently cried and prayed for the demons to leave her alone. Shortly before the murders, she threw pots and pans at the pool and kitchen walls to drown out the voices in her head, and sometimes banged her head against the wall to drive the demons away. Jocelyn's sisters blamed the Krim family for the tragedy, accusing them of exploiting she, not allowing her adequate rest, failing to notice signs of mental illness, and leaving her alone with the children. In court, a psychotherapist who had seen Jocelyn testified that he did not find any signs of mental disorder in her, only anxiety and mild depression due to concerns about her son. A recording of her conversation with a psychologist was played, confirming that she did not mention hearing voices or experiencing other symptoms of psychosis. The possibility of Jocelyn having a mental illness was dismissed. A psychiatrist, called by the prosecution, assumed she was angry and was faking psychosis. A relative of Jocelyn mentioned that she envied the Krim family because they could provide for their children in ways she could not, and she had to send her son to live with his grandparents when he was only 4 years old. The defense argued that tensions had arisen between Jocelyn and the Krim family. Besides taking care of the kids, she was also paid to clean their apartment and do odd jobs, which she was reluctant to do due to an allergy to cleaning products. She also disliked being asked by Marina to work for other families. On one occasion, Marina asks her to look after another family's child, while their nanny is on sick leave. She agreed, but the next day she refused to go to the other family. Marina confronted her about this near the school, in front of strangers, making she feel uncomfortable. Afterward, she sat in the park and cried. She believed that Marina intended to humiliate her in front of others. Tensions between the Krim and Jocelyn continued to rise. They were unhappy with her work in the weeks leading up to the murder and had warned her that if she did not improve her performance, she would have to find another job. In particular, Marina felt that she did not spend enough time interacting with the children and fed them unhealthy food. The day before the murder, Marina did not say goodbye to she, which made she very angry and upset. Jocelyn was upset with the Krim family due to a constant lack of money. She also disliked the frequently changing work schedule, which sometimes caused her to miss doctor's appointments. Prolonged dissatisfaction, along with mental disorder, made she increasingly angry, something she could not control. Without realizing what she was doing, she committed murder, her lawyer said. However, the prosecutor argued that the crime was carefully planned in advance. The day before the crime, Jocelyn returned home, took medicine for a headache, talked to her sister Celia, and asked her to care for Jesus as if little boy were her own son. Celia agreed without understanding what Jocelyn meant. On the day of the murders, Jocelyn ensured her son got to school safely and said goodbye to little boy before heading to work. She left Celia an envelope containing important personal documents such as her passport, driver's license, bank cards, insurance certificate, and some cash. She also attached a paper bag with family memorabilia, photographs, and her jewelry to her son's room door. The prosecutor believed this was her way of saying goodbye to her family, she knowing she wouldn't return. She also deliberately did not take Lucia to ballet lessons. The prosecution argued that Jesus' move to the United States triggered her, increased her anxiety, depression, and guilt, so her resentment toward the Krim family also increased. On April 18, 2018, the jury found Jocelyn Ortegas guilty of first-degree child murder. The jury describing her actions as pure evil and dismissing the defense's argument that she wasn't responsible due to mental illness. Although the judge acknowledged that her mental illness influenced her actions that day, he expressed regret that she nor had secured the psychiatric treatment she needed. However, he stressed that planning a crime on that day had been meticulous. Before the court handed down its verdict, Marina said that Jocelyn ended up destroying her own family. At this point, Marina broke into tears, and Jocelyn shamefully lowered her head. Despite the terrible tragedy, the Krim family remained strong. They went on to have 2 more children sons named Felix and Nose. Kevin requested the judge impose the maximum penalty on Jocelyn to ensure she would never leave prison. He observed no remorse from her and believed she should just spend the rest of her life in prison. The prosecutor echoed Kevin's request, urging the judge to sentence her to life imprisonment without parole. He argued that Jocelyn not only brutally killed Lucia and Leo, and she didn't even regret her actions. She attempted to end her own life to escape responsibility for her actions, but her plan did not succeed. Jocelyn's lawyer requested leniency from the judge during sentencing. She argued that the jury reached this decision because they were influenced by Marina's emotional state, not based on an objective assessment of the evidence. Ultimately, the judge ruled in favor of the prosecution. On May 14, 2018, Jocelyn Ortega, aged 55, received the maximum sentence of life imprisonment without parole. However, she remained composed for most of the trial. The case was particularly difficult when it involved the children, which moved many to tears, but Jocelyn did not cry. When witnesses described the kindness of the Krim family towards her, she shook her head in disagreement. However, she began to cry when the verdict was announced. After the verdict, Jocelyn expressed her regret in Spanish, saying she very sorry about everything that happened and asked for forgiveness from God, Marina, and Kevin. During the trial, it was disclosed that the Krim family had been misled by false claims of Jocelyn's experience as a nanny. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jesse McFadden. At that time, Holly was 35 years old. She had 3 children from a previous relationship: 13 years old Tiffany, 17 years old Raleigh Allen, and 15 years old Michael Mayo. Each child had a different father. Holly was married to Joe, a prominent man, for 13 years. He was a wonderful father and stepfather to all the children. Even after their divorce, Joe continued to care for the children as if they were his own. He also wanted to adopt Raleigh and Michael, but he was never able to do so. Holly's new husband, Jesse McFadden, was not as good a father as Joe. At 39 years old, Jesse had a troubling past, including a criminal record. In 2003, he was charged with assaulting and raping a 15-year-old girl at knife point. He received a 20-year prison sentence, but got out 3 years early, in October 2020, after serving 17 years. Despite his history, Jesse was not placed on the sex offender list or the list of potentially dangerous criminals, which the authorities should have done. As a result, he kept his past from Holly and portrayed himself as a model stepfather. He attended her children's sports games and engaging with the family. His past remained hidden, and he was seen as a good person. He gives the impression of being a kind man and regularly attended the local church. Holly had no idea that she was getting involved with a very dangerous man. Jesse was about to go crazy and commit a heinous crime. In 1916, while serving time in prison, he had his mobile phone confiscated. On the phone, authorities found photos, videos, and text messages involving a 16-year-old girl named Caitlin. Her grandfather accidentally discovered this sensitive content and reported it to the police, thereby leading to an investigation in the prison. At that time, Jesse was considered a model prisoner, participating in almost all activities, which under state law, made him eligible for parole after serving 85% of his sentence. Despite meeting all the conditions for parole, Jesse lost this privilege due to the incident involving Caitlin. However, he eventually managed to resolve the situation and secure his parole. After being released from prison, Jesse followed the rule of reporting to the sheriff's office every 90 days. He did this so discreetly that Holly, the children, and neighbors were unaware of his situation. Holly, his wife, was unaware that he was forbidden from being in places with children, such as schools and sports matches. Meanwhile, Jesse was still under investigation and awaiting trial for explicit photos of Caitlin he had corresponded with while in prison. The trial was delayed until 2023 due to a series of unfortunate incidents. The prosecutor handling the case was suspended, and Jesse's lawyer passed away. On May 1, 2023, as the trial is about to begin, a terrible tragedy occurred the day before. On the morning of May 1, 2023, the parents of Ivy and Brittany became worried. Ivy and Brittany are Tiffany's friends. They were best friends and often spent time together, including sleeping together overnight. Everyone expected Ivy and Brittany to return home after a sleepover on April 29, but both did not return. Initially, their parents weren't concerned, as the girls frequently stayed overnight at each other's houses, and they assumed their daughters were spending another night with Tiffany. However, by the morning of May 1, they still cannot contact their children. Ivy and Brittany did not respond to their parents' calls or text messages and could not be located using the Life 360 app. Ivy and Brittany's parents also couldn't contact Tiffany and her family to confirm if their daughters were there. Because they were increasingly worried, they reported Ivy and Brittany missing to the police that same day. The police issued a missing persons alert for Ivy and Brittany and immediately began an investigation. Based on information from the girls' parents, they decided to check Jesse's house, where Ivy and Brittany were before they went missing. Upon arrival, the police officers knocked on the door but received no response. Looking through the windows, they saw something unusual inside, so they decided to enter the house. The scene inside the house horrified all the police. Inside, they found 7 mutilated bodies. Some people can only be identified through forensic examination. Among them was Jesse himself, his wife Holly, Riley, Michael, Tiffany, Brittany, and Ivy. All the victims were shot in the head with a 9mm pistol. Bodies were scattered throughout the house. The detectives determined that the murderer was a former criminal named Jesse McFadden. He attacked all the victims and then ended his life. The probable reason was that on May 1st, he was supposed to start a trial that had been postponed for a long time. It is presumed that he did it because he could no longer hide his dark criminal past. Perhaps his wife, Holly, discovered it, or he was worried that she would soon find out, so he killed his entire family to take his secret to the grave. After the officers reviewed Jesse's cell phone, they were able to clarify the motive. On April 30th, he contacted Caitlin, a girl he had been messaging from prison, using a fake account under the name Holly. He accused her of not withdrawing the charges against him, which he claimed was destroying his well-established life. He explained that after being released 2 years ago, he had rebuilt his life. He found a high-paying marketing job, started a family. He tried to convince Caitlin to recant her testimony to stop the trial. He argued that he had a good family and promising future. He sent several angry messages, asserting that he would never return to prison, regardless of the cost. The police concluded that he was enraged because he couldn't control his accuser, Caitlin. Detectives contacted Crystal Strong, a 36-year-old woman who was Jesse's first victim. In 2002, when she was only 15, Jesse attacked her with a knife. She was shocked to hear that he might be released from prison, believing he should remain behind bars forever. Crystal learns that the man who brutally sexually assaulted her has been pardoned. Despite the decision being made, but she still asked Oklahoma authorities to prevent his release because she believed he was dangerous in nature. At that time, she feared for her safety. After the attack, she detailed her ordeal to the police. Jesse, then 19 and dating her friend, kidnapped her from her home while she was alone. He took her to a secluded house in his pickup truck, where he chained her to a bed and brutally raped her. Despite her pleas for him to stop and release her, but he threatened her with a knife and continued his assault. Fortunately, he didn't kill her. Jesse instructed Crystals to wash off the evidence and clean her clothes. She agreed but instead used the opportunity to escape through the back door. She was crying and ran about half a kilometer to a neighbor's house to call the police. Following this, she underwent an extensive rehabilitation process, which helped her return to a normal life. She relocated to Kansas, where she hid for years due to the trauma of the brutal attack. Although doctors initially believed she couldn't have children, thankfully, their predictions were wrong. Crystal now has 4 children, which she views as a miracle. Crystal is confused that the police released Jesse, a dangerous criminal, too soon, even though she warned that he could not be reformed. It is also confusing why he was freed early despite being intoxicated. She believes the legal system has failed them, especially when he murdered 6 people in a brutal and painful manner. The victims' families also expressed their anger over Jesse's early release. It's hard to imagine how this cruel person managed to pretend to be a loving husband, a respectable neighbor, and a caring stepfather. None of his close friends suspect his horrific past. Although he regularly interacted with various people since December 2020, they were all shocked when the truth emerged. Ivy and Brittany's parents remember that their daughter and Tiffany were very close and often visited each other's homes. Ivy and Brittany's parents were familiar with Jesse and Holly and communicated with them regularly. They did not suspect Jesse, although he occasionally appeared strange and withdrawn. He had the odd habit of controlling Holly's and the children's movements, but they did not think much of it. Ivy and Brittany, who frequently stayed overnight at their homes, never mentioned anything negative about Jesse or his behavior. Ivy and Brittany never showed signs of bruises or injuries that would suggest abuse. During the investigation, it was discovered that Holly learned about Jesse's criminal past shortly before the tragedy. Holly's ex-husband found out about Jesse's criminal record by checking the database. He informed Holly, but Jesse acted quickly to cover up his past. Jesse hired an actress to convince Holly that the sexual assault allegations against him were a misunderstanding. The actress admitted that after the breakup, she accused Jesse of violence out of anger. However, she retracted the accusation after realizing she was wrong. Holly, unfortunately, believed this lie. Inside the house, police discovered even more terrifying clues. They found that all of Jesse's victims had been subjected to severe torture. The house resembled a torture chamber, with several beds equipped with chains and locks to restrain people. In the kitchen, police found a chain with a lock and different torture devices. The shocking clues are not just that. Bottles of lubricant and other sexual items were strewn around the house. Illegal substances and their paraphernalia were found across all rooms, including candies laced with similar content. Police also discovered other strange-looking objects and various blood-stained items, such as clothes, rags, and bed linen. Altogether, these clues indicate that the crime was horrific, revealing that Jesse's victims endured brutal torture before being killed. Holly and her children were likely tortured for several days. On April 29th, when Ivy and Brittany did visit Tiffany, they fell into a trap. They were tortured. Then, as they struggled to escape, but Jesse captured and killed them. During a house search, several laptops and mobile phones belonging to Jesse were discovered. These devices contained photos and videos documenting his torture activities. There was so much shocking evidence that the police couldn't collect everything in one day. Additional evidence of the brutal torture was gathered a few days later. A second search was conducted, uncovering more hidden evidence in the house and revealing new details. Receipts were found for purchases of locks, chains, and other items, shows that Jesse had a plan to control the victims. In addition, 5 other cell phones were found, along with Jesse's notebook, which contained the names of his recent victims. Jesse noted that he wanted to start a new life and become a better person, but no matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't change the past. He also did not hesitate to impersonate Ivy. For example, Ivy's mother said the last message she received from her daughter was on Saturday, April 29th. They agreed that Ivy would come home on Sunday, April 30th. However, on the morning of April 30th, she received a text saying Ivy and her friends were going to another city and couldn't return that evening. Therefore, she didn't worry until the morning of May 1st. Although there were reasons for concern, she didn't notice them right away. The communication style of the message was unlike her daughter's. She thought it was because Ivy was in a hurry to get ready for the trip. Only now does she realize that her daughter was probably no longer alive at that point, and it was Jesse who was messaging her. The hardest thing for Holly's ex-husband, who is also the father of Riley, Michael, and Tiffany, is that he has been unable to provide any information to the police. Holly's ex-husband accused Jesse not only of the crimes he committed but also of his lies. He criminal tricked Holly by hiring an actress and hid his violent nature from friends, neighbors, and his new family for 2 years. The parents of Ivy and Brittany frequently visited their home, but no one suspected Jesse could be dangerous or doubted his identity. Detectives spoke with Jesse's former cellmate and were even more amazed at his deceptive skills. The cellmate, who spent almost every hour of the day with Jesse, only realized something was off after 6 months. Initially, Jesse seemed just like an eccentric and awkward individual. Nearly every conversation with him led to the topic of sex, revealing his obsession with it. At a medical facility, the cellmate saw Jesse stalking nurses. When he asked Jesse about his conviction, he got a vague response. Jesse mentioned a much lesser charge than what he had committed. The truth came out during an incident involving a contraband phone, which worsened the atmosphere in the cell. From then on, the cellmate was constantly tense, unable to sleep peacefully whenever Jesse was around. The tragic death of 6 people has caused strong public outrage. People were shocked by the incident. 6 innocent individuals were killed: Holly, her 3 children, and 2 teenage friends, Ivy and Brittany. The public accused state police of negligence, ignoring evidence, and failing to monitor dangerous criminals and manage parole for Jesse. Everyone was outraged, questioning why no one recognized how dangerous Jesse was. They believed that if his danger had been known, people would have avoided interacting with him, potentially preventing this tragedy. Even now, this case leaves more questions than answers. Holly's behavior is also unclear. The police are exploring all possibilities, including the idea that she not only knew about Jesse's past but also became an accomplice. Holly's mother firmly denies this theory, insisting that she was a loving, caring mother who could never harm her children. The police are still considering the possibility that Holly was an accomplice, but things spiraled out of control, leading Jesse to kill her and then end his life. However, these claims have yet to be confirmed or refuted. The investigation is ongoing. Jesse McFadden's family has been plagued by legal issues. His younger brother, Cody, has been involved in legal trouble since 2010. Cody was arrested for kidnapping a woman, locking her in a dog cage, assaulting her, and torturing her. Cody's case is still pending in court. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren Heike. Lauren Heike was born on November 20, 1993, in Cedo, Washington, USA, into a wealthy family. Her father owned a plumbing company, and her mother worked in real estate. She was close with her brother, Ryan. She graduated from Silver Daily High School in Washington and then moved to Phoenix, Arizona, to study cosmetology and skin care. She began working at 18 and built a successful career. Her first job was as a customer service representative. In 2015, she became a leading manager at the well-known company Benefit, where she worked for 5 years. Afterward, she worked as a cosmetologist in a beauty salon for 9 months. In October 2020, she took a manager position at a center for aesthetic medicine. She planned to follow her mother's path in real estate and wanted to explore that field. At the time of the tragedy, she was working as a full-time instructor at a golf club. Lauren was never afraid of challenges and never got discouraged. She easily connected with new colleagues and was very responsible. She is actively involved in the fields of beauty, sports, and real estate. Everyone who knew her described her as bright, kind, and humorous. Lauren is in good health, plays sports regularly and leads an active, healthy lifestyle. She has many good friends and spends most of her free time going out with them. She also loved to travel. Every day, after waking up, she has the habit of going for a walk. She found joy in even the simplest things, like a morning walk or a cup of coffee at breakfast. Tragically, Lauren's life ended at just 29 years old. Her loved ones are deeply saddened by her passing. On April 28, 2023, she started her day as usual. After waking up, she had coffee, spoke with family and friends on the phone, and prepared for a walk. Her route was that she passed through North Phoenix, near her apartment. As always, she intended to enjoy the fresh air and recharge for the day. This walk in the park is her favorite, as it gives her a path to reflect in quiet space. However, on that day, she didn't return home from her walk. Later, Lauren's colleagues and friends grew concerned when she didn't show up at work. This behavior is unlike her, as she usually lets others know if she is unwell and unable to go to work. She didn't call anyone, and she also didn't answer calls or messages from people. Her family also sensed something was wrong when she didn't contact them after the walk. This is unusual and worrying. Unable to reach her, relatives called the police and reported she missing. The police took the statement and went to Lauren's house to investigate. When the officers arrived at her house, she wasn't there. They looked through the windows but saw no one inside. Since she lived alone, there was no one to provide information about her daily routine. After checking the house, the officers found no signs of a break-in or anything suspicious. It seemed as if she had just left and never returned, possibly encountering trouble elsewhere. Lauren could not be reached, so police stepped up their search. They contacted all of her acquaintances, but no one had seen her that day. The search for Lauren began, and it wasn't long before she was found. The next day, April 29th, around 11 a.m., her body was discovered on her favorite walking path, the same one she had visited on the day she went missing. A resident of a nearby apartment complex, who was also her neighbor, out walking their dog, found her body. The dog led its owner to the location. The area was difficult to see clearly. Because of this, no passers-by discovered her body on the day of her death. Lauren, who often walked along this route with a neighbor, became a victim. The neighbor was shocked to find her and immediately called the police to report it. She described the body as having wounds that looked like knife stabs. The police quickly arrived, secured the scene, and forensic experts began searching for evidence. Authorities informed Lauren's family that her body might have been found and asked them to come for identification. Lauren's family identified her immediately. However, the official identification results were announced on May 1st. Her body was sent for an autopsy, and the forensic expert determined she was stabbed to death around 11 a.m. on April 28, 2023, the day she disappeared. The autopsy showed she had about 15 stab wounds, all on the upper body, with a deep stab in the back being fatal. The knife went in approximately 8 centimeters. Based on the wounds, the expert suggested that a penknife was used in the murder. Lauren fiercely fought for her life, which was evident from the multiple stab wounds on her hands, typical of defensive actions. There were also minor cuts and abrasions all over her body, showing her death was painful and prolonged. She attempted to defend herself and resist, but the attacker was more powerful. Furthermore, the surprise element of the attack may have played an important role, since she was suddenly attacked by a couple. While forensic experts were conducting the autopsy, the police continued to thoroughly investigate the murder scene. They discovered the reason for the numerous abrasions on Lauren's body. Along the path she had been walking, there was a barbed wire fence. It seems she attempted to crawl through it to escape, but couldn't succeed, resulting in her torn clothes and multiple abrasions and bruises. Additionally, at the crime scene, items were found that she had taken with her on her walk. Because the area where Lauren's body was found is near residential areas, so there was a high likelihood that both she and culprit were captured on surveillance cameras. The police obtained the necessary footage and thoroughly reviewed the incident of that morning. They discovered a video segment showing Lauren walking along a path around 10:52 a.m. She is calmly passing the area covered by the camera. About 22 seconds later, a tall, thin man dressed in a light t-shirt and dark shorts, carrying a backpack, is seen running behind her. However, he quickly vanished into the wooded area. A few minutes later, the same man from the recording exited the park and ran in the opposite direction. It was clear he was trying to cross the barbed wire fence, but quickly disappeared from the camera's view. No one else was present at the time, making him the main suspect in the case. Police reviewed security camera footage and identified the suspect, but ran into a major problem. The video quality was so poor, so it was impossible to identify the person's face or any features. The only clue was that he appeared to be a young black man. These recordings were shown on local television in hopes that someone could identify he. Several people have contacted the police with information. Although the information verification process took quite a while, no important clues were found. The police needed to analyze all Lauren's belongings found at the crime scene. Near the barbed wire fence, detectives discovered shoes. DNA analysis of her shoes revealed DNA that did not belong to her, likely belonging to the attacker. It was assumed that the attacker grabbed she by the leg, leaving his DNA behind. The sample was sent to the lab for further examination. After analyzing the results, the police uploaded the DNA test findings to their database. They found a match. The DNA belonged to 22-year-old Zion William Teasley, who had a previous criminal record. He had never held a steady job. A detailed review of his criminal history showed a series of convictions starting in 2020. However, the current charges were the most serious among his offenses. He had been involved in several assaults, burglaries, armed robberies, and minor acts of vandalism. In 2021, the police obtained his confession for the crimes he committed. In exchange, many of his intoxication charges, totaling about 10, were dismissed. He served 16 months in prison and was released in November 2022. The prosecutor's office encouraged him to cooperate with the investigation. Even though his DNA was on Lauren's shoes, that doesn't mean he's the killer. His DNA might have accidentally ended up on Lauren's shoes. This was not enough to arrest and charge he. More convincing evidence was needed. Therefore, detectives decided to examine his mobile phone. Officers tracked the location of Zion's mobile phone. The phone records showed it was in the area where Lauren was killed, at about the same time in the morning. Moreover, the route taken by Zion's phone matched exactly with the movements of the person seen on video. Doubts about Zion grew, but this evidence was not enough to convict him. So, the officers canvassed the area, questioning residents of nearby houses. They hoped to find people who knew the suspect and were able to identify him in the camera footage. Several local residents confirmed that the man in the video resembled Zion. Detectives consulted Zion's acquaintances, and they provided useful information. They revealed that he owned a penknife with a blade exactly 8 centimeters long, closely matching the weapon used in the murder. During the investigation, Zion remained placed on probation for a previous assault conviction. Just 5 days after Lauren's murder, he reported to the police department as required. Officers decided to speak with his probation officer. The officer mentioned that Zion appeared nervous during their last meet, as if he was anxious about something. When shown CCTV footage of the suspect, the probation officer said that the person resembled Zion in both physique and appearance and wore similar headphones. However, the officer couldn't be completely certain that the person on camera was the same as the one Zion. Soon after, the police decided to question Zion, the prime suspect. This meeting occurred on May 4th at his residence in Teasley, located on North Scottsdale Route, just a 5-minute walk from where Lauren was murdered. The police met Zion and asked him to come in for questioning. He agreed and accompanied them to the station, and he was shown CCTV footage of Lauren and suspect. During the interrogation, he became nervous, frequently changed his story. Initially, he claimed he had never seen Lauren. But he later insisted that he was not the person in the CCTV footage and denied any involvement in the murder. Police discovered contradiction in Zion's statement during the first interrogation. He confessed to the attack, but maintained that at the time, he was not aware of his actions. He explained that he had a difficult childhood, growing up in a poor family, where he was bullied. To survive, he resorted to stealing and eventually committed other crimes. The motives for the attack on Lauren, as well as some details, remain unknown and are being kept secret. After the attack, while the investigation was still ongoing, he went on the run and tried to hide his identity. He noticed that the news frequently covered the murder and showed surveillance footage. So, he decided to flee the city. However, he was arrested before he could escape. After Zion's arrest, police found a plane ticket to Detroit in his house, which supported his plan to escape. 6 days after the attack, the police capturing him. If he had fled to another state, it would have been much more challenging to catch and convict him. During their investigation, police uncovered issues with Zion's employment. They contacted the clothing store where he worked, but the manager revealed that he had been fired just days before the murder. The employer noted his aggressive behavior at work and suspected him of involvement in thefts from the store. This suspicion was confirmed by surveillance footage, showing he caught on camera with stolen items from the store. Consequently, he was terminated, although the store did not report him to the police. Zion was charged with first-degree murder on May 4, 2023. The prosecutor identified signs of premeditation in Lauren's murder and noted intentions of fleeing to another state. As a result, bail was set at $1 million, an amount he could not afford, leading to his continued imprisonment. Besides the murder charge, Zion faces accusations of violating terms related to placed on probation. Lauren's family expressed gratitude to Phoenix police for quickly apprehending an individual who posed a major threat to society, preventing further harm. They believe such dangerous individuals should be isolated permanently and have asked for life imprisonment. What do the injuries inflicted on Laura suggest? They show that there was no connection between her and Zion. They weren't acquainted, had no communication, and shared no mutual friends. Thus, Laura was in no way the one who made him aggressive, she just accidentally became the target of this evil person. If Zion is found guilty, he could face the death penalty. Arizona enforces the death sentence and is the only U.S. state that still uses gas chamber suffocation as a method of execution. Although this method is legally available in California, Missouri, and Wyoming, their gas chambers have been dismantled. Gas suffocation is considered inhumane because it causes a slow, terrifying, and painful death. The last person executed this way in Arizona was Walter Lagrand in 1999, who was convicted for murdering a bank manager. He suffered convulsions for 18 minutes in the gas chamber. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kimberly Proctor. Kimberly Proctor was born on January 1, 1992, in Langford, Canada. She came from a middle-class family. Her mother, Lucia, was a manager at Walmart, and her father, Fred, was a mechanic. Kimberly was known for her kind and loving nature, especially towards animals. She had several pets at home, including lizards, rabbits, mice, but her greatest love was for cats. Unfortunately, her fondness for cats led to years of bullying at school, where she often wore small cat ears, and this harassment continued for a long time. According to her mother, Kimberly faced bullying for most of her life. Kimberly's situation became more difficult when she was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, which made her more vulnerable to teasing. She began having panic attacks at school. As a result, her parents chose to enroll Kimberly in a different school. This school catered to young people with a variety of problems, including some who had been expelled from other schools for misbehavior. One of her classmates was Cruz Elwood, a boy who faced many challenges. Cruz lived with his mother. His father had been in prison since 2001 after being sentenced to 15 years for abusing and murdering a young girl. Cruz later admitted that he knew about his father's actions but did not want to talk about it. Despite his young age, Cruz was involved in drugs and had a history of stealing money from mailboxes. People who knew him described him as very intelligent. Another troubled student at the school was Cameron Moffat, a friend of Cruz's who was diagnosed with PTSD after being abused when he was 4 years old. Cameron had a difficult relationship with his parents, and neither medication nor counseling seemed to help. He often resisted treatment and began self-harming to cope with his anxiety. His aggressive behavior was evident both at home and at school, where he sometimes carried a knife. Cruz and Cameron met in the 5th grade and quickly became best friends. They did everything together, from skipping school to smoking marijuana. They also loved playing the computer game Warcraft and occasionally visited adult websites. Although their behavior at school was unpredictable, they were not seen as a serious threat. In February 2008, Cruz wrote a blog post about warning signs of a serial killer, listing common traits like cruelty to animals, a fascination with fire, parental abandonment, and a strong interest in violence. He pointed out that he fulfilled all 14 of the criteria he mentioned. By 2009, Kimberly had joined Cruz and Cameron's group, and they began to do everything together. When they weren't hanging out outside, they spent hours texting and chatting. During this time, Kimberly started dating Zach, who was friends with Cruz and Cameron. However, their relationship only lasted a couple of months before Zach decided to break up with her. This breakup upset Kimberly deeply, and she turned to her friends for support, spending long hours chatting online. During one of these conversations, Cameron revealed to Kimberly that he had feelings for her and thought she was beautiful. Kimberly appreciated the compliment but was only interested in Cruz, with whom she had grown closer after her breakup with Zach. Kimberly and Cruz began sharing their most private thoughts online, including secrets they had never revealed to anyone else. Kimberly opened up to Cruz about her honest feelings about her weight and height, and Cruz reassured her that she was beautiful just the way she was. However, Cruz and Cameron's lives began to take a dark and sinister turn. They began drinking blood and bodily fluids to see how they would feel. Cameron's friends said that he would sometimes lash out at his family and yell at his mother, while Cruz became increasingly aggressive toward his mother and defied any restrictions placed on him. Both boys began to have disturbing fantasies about being restrained and abused, leading them to explore adult websites with violent themes. Their discussions with Kimberly became increasingly disturbing. One day, Cameron made an innuendo-filled remark to Kimberly that upset her. When she shared this with Cruz, he responded by making the same suggestion. When Kimberly refused, Cruz threatened her ominously, saying, "Death is coming for you, and you will soon be dead." He then asked her about her plans for the next day. Cruz expressed interest in meeting her to discuss why some people were treating her so badly and other personal issues. They eventually agreed to call and meet the next day. She had no idea that Cruz had already contacted Cameron and they were exchanging messages about Kimberly. In Cameron and Cruz's conversation before the terrible events, they mentioned that they should proceed with their plan, saying that they have to be careful and that it will be interesting. They expressed their desire to do it immediately instead of waiting, saying that they will not harm her right away and can keep her alive but tied up. Later, Cameron and Cruz decide on a specific phrase to signal when to act to harm Kimberly. Cruz also suggests that they meet at the Ford bus stop at 10 o'clock. 18-year-old Kimberly accidentally found herself in a dangerous situation. That morning, Kimberly was still in bed while her mother, Lucia, prepared to leave for work. Before leaving, Lucia kissed Kimberly and expressed her love for her. Since Kimberly had no classes that day, her mother thought she would sleep in, especially since her only commitment was babysitting at 3 p.m. They had planned to start sewing Kimberly's prom dress together when Lucia returned home. However, Lucia was unaware that Kimberly had other plans. She had arranged to meet Cameron and Cruz at the bus station around 10:30 a.m. Kimberly got off the bus at the stop where her friends were waiting. Just minutes earlier, Cameron and Cruz had bought a can of gasoline as part of their terrifying plan. The three friends chatted for a while before heading to Cruz's house in Bali. Up until this point, everything seemed normal to Kimberly, and she had no idea of the terrifying situation her friends had planned for her. When they arrived at the house, Cruz used a code word to signal Cameron, and almost immediately, both attacked Kimberly, beating and kicking her. They bound her feet and ankles, stuffed a sock in her mouth, and taped it shut. Cameron and Cruz violently assaulted Kimberly for hours, ultimately causing her death by suffocation. Afterward, they desecrated her body in horrific ways, mutilating her and placing various items in her genital area, before storing her in a freezer in Cruz's garage. Cruz attempted to cover his tracks and establish an alibi by sending her a message from his computer. In this message, he pretended to be far away and asked her if she had completed her work as a nanny, claiming he needed her advice. Cameron and Cruz's actions were extremely disturbing, and they treated it as a game. That same night, after committing the horrific act, Cruz texted his girlfriend, asking her to come out of the house to meet him. Fortunately, she refused, which may have saved her life. The next morning, Cameron and Cruz placed Kimberly's body in a hockey bag and calmly took a bus to a remote forested area. There, they doused the bag with gasoline and set it on fire. During this time, Cruz made the mistake of using his cell phone to send a message. Meanwhile, Kimberly's parents and relatives were in a state of panic, unaware of her whereabouts. Her mother, Lucia, had tried to call Kimberly the day before, but when her calls went directly to voicemail, she sensed something was wrong. Lucia went to the police station to report Kimberly missing, and the search for Kimberly quickly began. After causing Kimberly's death, both Cruz and Cameron continued their lives as if nothing had happened. Cruz spent the day at home with his girlfriend, while Cameron had lunch with his mother and grandmother. Then they took him to buy a new video game. That night, a young man who was hanging out with friends discovered charred body under a bridge. The body was burned beyond recognition. The body was later identified through dental records and was that of Kimberly. The tragic news devastated Kimberly's family and friends. Police arrived to investigate the crime scene. At the time, police had no leads to identify anyone responsible for this horrific crime. Kimberly's family and friends reported that she had no known conflicts with anyone and were puzzled as to who could have harmed her. In her memory, the family created a Facebook page, which police are closely monitoring in the hopes of uncovering any clues. They are also keeping a close eye on all of Kimberly's acquaintances. The story of the horrific incident shocked Canada, and every media outlet covered it. At the time, Cruz was eager to share his dark exploit with someone he trusted. He decided to use the in-game chat feature, believing that chat records were unlikely to be kept or checked. On March 23, 5 days after the murder, Cruz messaged a young girl from Halifax, urging her to read something important. He then sent her links to news articles about the incident to prove that he was telling the truth. The girl was horrified by what Cruz revealed but reacted the way he wanted, assuring him that she would always support him, no matter what his actions were. Cruz replied that that's why he trusted her, and he would repay her trust, no matter what. Suddenly, Cameron joined the conversation and backed up Cruz's account. The girl asked Cameron if he had any thoughts about Kimberly's family and friends and the lives he had impacted. Cameron simply replied that he felt no remorse for any of that. The young girl wrote to Cruz again, asking him not to repeat his previous actions. He promised he wouldn't. As time went on, the Cameron and Cruz their lives as if nothing had happened, but they kept a close eye on the investigation's progress. Their online chats and text messages mostly revolved around updates related to the case. Cruz confided to a friend that his father had advised him not to answer questions at school. This advice may have stemmed from his father's suspicion that Cruz was involved in Kimberly's death or knew who was responsible. An incident later occurred involving Samantha, one of Kimberly's close friends, who overheard Cruz making negative comments about Kimberly. Samantha asked him to stop, explaining that it still hurt her to hear such things so soon after Kimberly's death. In response, Cruz yelled that he did not care about Kimberly's death. Another student even reported hearing Cruz say that he was glad Kimberly was dead because he did not like her. At that point, police began investigating Cameron and Cruz, leading to their questioning. Both admitted to seeing Kimberly on the morning she went missing, but said they didn't spend much time with her because she had to go to school. Police began monitoring Cameron and Cruz's online activities. Police obtained a warrant to install wiretaps in their home and both were placed under close surveillance. Their cell phones were also tapped and investigations into their devices were conducted. Disturbing evidence was discovered, including text messages exchanged between them in online chats. Police seized numerous documents related to their activities. Police believe Cruz and Cameron were responsible for Kimberly's death. Cameron and Cruz were then arrested and charged with Kimberly's murder. Both appeared calm and unresponsive. Cruz remained silent throughout the interrogation. Cameron, on the other hand, repeatedly taunted the police and refused to provide any information. He eventually confessed to his crimes in a cold manner. After Cameron's confession, Cruz was forced to admit everything. They both later pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and destruction of human remains. A year after the events of 2011, Cameron and Cruz appeared at their trial, appearing calm and talking animatedly to each other about the questions they were being questioned about. Throughout the hearing, they remained calm and unflinching. A psychological evaluation found that Cruz displayed characteristics of a rapist that were rare for his age and was at high risk of committing violent acts again. He was also diagnosed with clinical psychopathy. The psychiatrist indicated that Cruz would require intensive and prolonged supervision for at least the next 10 years. Cameron had a high rate of reoffending and serious mental health issues. During the hearing, the judge needed to decide whether to try both young men as adults and transfer them to an adult prison or to treat them as juveniles. It's important to note that the defense requested they be tried as adults, believing this would provide the boys with better educational and rehabilitation opportunities. Only Kimberly's parents were focused on seeking the death penalty for the Cameron and Cruz. However, Canada does not have a death penalty. If the young men are tried as adults, they would face life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after serving 25 years. If Cruz and Cameron had been tried as juveniles, The maximum sentence they would have faced would have been 6 years, along with 4 years of community service. Cameron Moffat and Cruz Wellwood were then sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of appealing for bail after only 10 years. Kimberly's family has expressed their anger at the lenient sentence. Kimberly's father, Fred, expressed concern that Cameron and Cruz might continue their harmful behavior and that this was unacceptable. Fred pointed out that both had confessed to their actions but showed no remorse, which he believed justified their lifelong detention. Meanwhile, Pacific High School, which Kimberly and the two killers attended, has established a protocol for dealing with threats of violence. The protocol would allow police, schools, and social services to exchange information about students who might pose a threat in order to prevent tragic consequences. When asked why they had treated Kimberly's body that way, Cruz mentioned that for him, it was about finding the satisfaction he craved. And he felt a sense of power in taking someone's life. He shared that his life until then had felt empty and pointless, and this act gave him a sense of fulfillment. Cruz's first petition for parole was set for June 2019 but was postponed to August. The psychological evaluation conducted at that time was nearly identical to the initial assessment, indicating that Cruz was still completely unfit for parole. Consequently, the specialist did not recommend granting him release in 2020. His appeal was denied once more, meaning Cruz will have to wait until 2025 for another chance at parole. Sometimes people get a second chance, but this case should not have been given a second chance. It was clear that there was a deliberate intention to commit a terrible act. Individuals like Cameron and Cruz acted out their darkest fantasies without remorse. In fact, it was revealed that Kimberly was just one of 3 victims they targeted. Given the nature of their actions and the psychiatric evaluations, it is clear that Cameron and Cruz should not be allowed to live freely in society. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Fernando Federico Reyes. The exact birth date of Fernando Federico Reyes is unknown, but he was born around 1983 in the village of Pampa Blanca, located in the El Carmen department of Jujuy province in northeastern Argentina. He was the youngest of 5 children of Orlando Reese and his wife, Tate. Records indicate that his older brother was named Diego. There is little information about Fernando's childhood and adolescence. In 2008, Fernando, then in his 20s, met 14-year-old Dana Estrella Belen Martinez. Despite their age difference, they quickly developed a relationship. Dana, born in 1994, grew up in the same village and had a close relationship with Fernando's family. She was known for her cheerful, energetic personality and for spreading positivity to those around her. Dana loved the nightlife and often attended parties. Their friendship quickly developed into a serious relationship and they began living together. They moved to the city of Pampa Blanca, and Fernando made a living as a taxi driver. A year and a half after moving in, the couple finally contacted Fernando's relatives to tell them about their new home. They shared how their lives had changed and reassured his family that everything was okay. Some time later, Fernando began to keep in regular contact with his mother and often sought her advice, especially during conflicts with Dana. At the beginning of their journey, both Fernando and Dana had frequent job changes, which affected their finances. As a result, they were evicted from their home in Lario. Undeterred, they moved to Las Naga in the province of Belen. In this small village, they rented a small house owned by a man named Jose Cruz. Once they settled in, the neighbors quickly became aware of the couple's financial difficulties. Although the villagers themselves were not wealthy, they organized a fundraiser to provide Fernando and Dana with clothes, shoes, and food. The couple was extremely grateful for their kindness. The couple made new friends, including Maria and Simon. At the same time, Fernando's relationship with Dana was getting worse, which did not escape the notice of their neighbors. As arguments became frequent, the couple decided to separate. However, Fernando couldn't leave the children, so they all continued to live together under one roof. Over time, Dana began to threaten Fernando, warning him that if he left her and their children, she would report him to the police for violence. This behavior made their relationship even more complicated. As he usually did, Fernando reached out to his relatives to explain what was happening, including Dana's threats and his wish to divorce her. His parents, who lived in Jujuy, were concerned about their son's family issues. Dana begins to develop a close relationship with Simon and Maria. Dana's provocative actions increased the conflict between her and Fernando. In late November 2022, Jose, the owner of the house Dana and Fernando rent, invites Fernando to the Virgen del Valle de Catamarca celebration, which will take place from Sunday, December 4th to Thursday, December 8th. Fernando agreed to go. On Saturday night, December 3rd, there was a dance at the San Roca Club. Dana attended with Simon and Maria. When Fernando arrived, he and Dana got into an argument, but it quickly calmed down. People around witnessed the incident but did not intervene. Finally, frustrated and angry, Fernando decided to leave and headed toward a deserted area. Fernando was suddenly attacked by Dana, Simon and Maria, who hit him several times on the head with blunt objects. He fell and died on the spot. The attackers then set fire to it and threw Fernando's body into it. One of the residents of La Ciénaga saw the fire in the field but did not think much of it. Eventually, it became clear that the fire did not completely burn the body. The three then placed the remains in bags and went to the banks of the Belen River. There, they dug 2 holes and buried 2 bags containing Fernando's body. Dana, Maria, and Simon returned to the party, where they drank, danced, and had fun until dawn, as if nothing had happened and without arousing the suspicions of the locals. On Sunday, December 4th, Jose was waiting for his friend Fernando to arrive for a party they had planned. As time passed and Fernando still hadn't shown up, Jose began to worry and reached out to Dana for clarification. She informed him that Fernando had gone to visit his family. Jose was left feeling confused and bewildered. He couldn't understand why Fernando hadn't told him about this. Days went by, but Fernando still didn't contact Jose. Concerned that something might be wrong, Jose asked Dana again for more information. It was then that she revealed that Fernando and Dana had decided to separate. The neighbors found it odd that the loud arguments in the couple's home suddenly stopped. Additionally, no one had seen Fernando for several days. Then, Dana told Jose that Fernando had gone back to the province of Larioca and found a well-paying job there. However, as she tried to dodge uncomfortable questions, her answers became more vague and unconvincing. This led Jose to doubt her stories. Over time, the children also noticed their father's absence and innocently asked their mother about it. Dana shared the heartbreaking news that their dad had died and was buried by the river. The children, feeling disheartened, did not fully understand what was happening. They began to bring flowers to the spot where their father had died. Jose decided to talk to the neighbors to gather information about Fernando's disappearance. 2 residents reported seeing the couple arguing. At a party later, another neighbor mentioned a fire that had broken out during the night. Meanwhile, Dana continued to deceive Fernando's family, claiming that he had abandoned her and the children. She also began asking them for money to support the children. In mid-April 2023, Jose, determined to uncover the truth, sought to verify whether Fernando had indeed returned to Jujuy and to his family. Fernando's brother, Diego, ignored the messages and then blocked Jose. Despite this setback, Jose persisted and contacted Fernando's sister in his quest for answers. Unfortunately, he also failed her, as she did not trust his intentions. In late April, a party was held 2 hours away from La Ciénaga. Dana and Fernando were guests at the event. Dana left her children at home and locked them inside. When she arrived at the party alone, the other guests became concerned because they had not seen Fernando since November, and he still had not shown up. Then Jose, the landlord, heard noises coming from the house. He had a spare key, so he decided to check inside. There, he found the small children left alone. One of the girls told him something that made him realize that he needed to call the police. On May 5, 2023, Jose reported Fernando missing. A large-scale search operation began shortly thereafter, involving police, forensic experts, and search dogs. The first day of the search yielded no results. Dana was taken to the police station for questioning. When the police arrived at her home, they were greeted by her eldest son, who told the same story as his sister. The police focused their search on the area near the river. During questioning, Dana maintained her previous statement about Fernando's trip to Jujuri, now claiming that he left because his brother Diego had died. To verify this claim, the police contacted Diego's relatives. After speaking with them, it became clear that Dana had lied, leading to her arrest on May 7th. The police focused their search on the location indicated by Fernando's son. They found a black plastic bag containing charred human remains approximately 160 to 165 centimeters tall and in a state of decomposition. Forensic doctors later confirmed that the remains were indeed human. The police sent the body to the forensic laboratory to confirm the identity of the deceased. This evidence prompted Dana to confess to the murder, especially when she was told that remaining silent could result in a life sentence. The interrogation, which was attended by Prosecutor Marina, lasted about 8 hours. Dana attempted to explain her actions in a way that minimized her guilt, claiming that she had acted in self-defense. She said that Fernando, 39, had harassed her, causing her to hit him without intending to kill him. She had misjudged the force of her blows, and when she realized that she had accidentally killed Fernando, she panicked and decided to cover up the crime. In addition, she was quick to reveal the identities of her accomplices in the early stages of the investigation. On the morning of May 8, 2023, after questioning, the prosecutor charged Dana with murder. Dana was arrested at the Belén police station. Meanwhile, Maria and Simon were charged with murder. Both were detained at the Belén police station. Dana, Maria, and Simon's cell phones were confiscated for thorough analysis. The police examined calls, messages, photos, videos, and other relevant documents. Fernando's family was extremely distressed. They were shocked by Dana's cruel actions. Fernando's family traveled to Catamarca to assist in the investigation. During this trip, they provided DNA samples and found solace in being reunited with the children. The children's grandmother took them home, bringing comfort to Fernando's relatives. On May 18th, Simon and Maria appeared before Prosecutor Marina, both represented by the same lawyer. They firmly denied any involvement in the incident. The lawyer argued that the testimony was unreliable, claiming that the evidence against Simon and Maria was insufficient. A few days later, the defense requested the results of psychological and psychiatric evaluations of the suspects. On May 31st, the judge granted the request, resulting in the suspension of the preliminary hearing. Prosecutor Marina requested that Dana, Simon, and Maria remain in custody until a trial date is set, given the seriousness of the crimes. Fernando's family attended the hearing to support the prosecution, represented by a lawyer. The hearing was originally scheduled for June 13, 2023, but was postponed and the next tentative date is currently unknown. Dana, Simon, and Maria, who are accused of murdering Fernando, will face justice for their actions. Fernando's relatives hope for a fair outcome. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Charlotte Brown. 20-year-old Charlotte Brown from Essex, a county in the southeast of England, was having a conversation with her sister Katie and a friend. They were discussing where to meet a young man. Charlotte shared that she was looking for a serious, long-term relationship and wasn't very interested in dating sites. However, her sister suggested a new dating site to her, and after some consideration, Charlotte signed up. Soon after, she received a message from a 24-year-old named Jack Shepherd. They began chatting online and got to know each other better. Things were going well. Jack and Charlotte planned to meet in person. However, on the day of their meeting, Jack sent Charlotte a text message apologizing and explaining that he couldn't meet because he was getting back together with his ex-girlfriend. Feeling frustrated, Charlotte decided to block Jack and continued her search for love on the site. A few months later, Jack reached out to Charlotte again. He expressed his sincere apologies for disappointing her and asked if they could meet to make amends. Charlotte agreed to go on a date with him. On December 8, 2015, Jack wanted to impress Charlotte, so he took her to the Shard, a well-known skyscraper in London. While enjoying wine and conversation, they seemed to be having a great time. Charlotte took photos and shared them with her sister. Later, Jack invited her to his boathouse to continue their evening, and she agreed. After Jack paid the bill, they took a taxi to his place, which was 10 miles away from Charlotte's home in Hammersmith. When they arrived at the boathouse and had a drink, Jack bragged about his boat and suggested they go out. Charlotte loved the idea, as she was hoping for a romantic adventure. She sent a text message to her sister, letting her know about the boat trip, but her sister appeared worried about the matter. Charlotte reassured her sister that everything would be fine. Charlotte had a great time on the boat, capturing the moments in photos and videos to send to her sister. They were sailing along the Thames one December night. Charlotte was laughing and even shouting with excitement. However, Jack began to speed up, and soon they were going twice the speed limit on the river. Witnesses observed the boat speeding along the Thames. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, followed by a cry for help. People called 911 to report that someone had fallen into the river and needed help nearby. Jack was holding on to the sides of the boat with his hands. The boat capsized near Onslow Bridge after hitting a submerged log. Police arrived at the scene and began searching the area, assisted by officers from the Marine Corps Support Unit and Air Support. At 11:40 p.m. that night, they found Jack clinging to the side of a boat, but Charlotte was missing. The Air Support Unit lit up the river with powerful searchlights to search for the Charlotte. When the lifeboat arrived, they discovered Charlotte, but she showed no signs of life. They attempted CPR on Charlotte, but it was to no avail. Her body grew colder and colder, and by the time she reached the hospital, she was pronounced dead. An autopsy revealed that Charlotte had died from prolonged exposure to cold water. The next day, the police brought in Jack Shepherd for questioning. Meanwhile, Charlotte's sister Katie had been texting her and was growing increasingly worried as she had not received a response throughout the night. Although Katie was busy with work during the day and could not be reached, it was clear that all of her texts and calls had gone unanswered. Additionally, Charlotte had not shown up for work, which was very unusual for her. Charlotte's mother was at home when the doorbell rang. She opened the door to two police officers who delivered the devastating news that Charlotte had died. This left her family and friends utterly heartbroken. During the investigation, Jack mentioned that he had met Charlotte around 6 p.m. for a date. He said they had never met before but had planned to go to the Shard and then return to his boat. Jack noted that he had trouble recalling the details of the evening. Jack said that he had been the one steering the boat. They had then switched positions. When Charlotte was steering the boat, he moved to a seat while holding on to the crossbar because of the speed. Jack mentioned that there were life jackets on the boat, but they had not warned them because he had not told Charlotte about them. He also noted that he was not sure if she knew how to swim because they had not discussed it. They had been drinking on the boat, but his memory of the whole thing was hazy. After the incident, Jack went to a restaurant, ordered a bottle of wine, had a meal, and drank another bottle of wine before taking a taxi home. He said his memory of the entire evening was hazy. According to Jack, Charlotte wanted to steer the boat and he allowed her to do so. His memory is unclear due to his intoxication, but he always remembered that Charlotte was at the helm. He said that when he got into the water, he called out to Charlotte, but she was gone. He was eventually rescued from the river, but Charlotte's bag, which contained documents, keys, wallet, and mobile phone, was never found because it had fallen into the water. During police questioning of Jack, he appeared very upset. He was described as a well-dressed, well-educated young man who repeatedly claimed that Charlotte was the boatman and blamed her for the incident. Shockingly, many who knew Charlotte or heard of what happened were largely critical of her. Jack told the police that he had taken about 10 girls out on his boat before, returning to the house for fun afterward. When asked whether he took all of his dates on the river, he stated that these boat rides were simply part of his usual routine to impress and charm girls. The police then inspected the boat and discovered it was old, had been involved in multiple accidents, and had undergone several repairs. It had many other serious flaws, making it dangerously unsafe. Charlotte's friend Lodi became curious about Jack and sought to learn more about him. She discovered that Jack was 30 years old, a successful web designer and developer, and enjoyed flaunting his wealth. Jack created his own online dating site that focused on facilitating brief encounters, typically for 1 or 2 meetings. On Facebook, Jack had numerous photos of himself, both alone and with friends and women. He referred to himself as Captain Jack and often bragged about himself. The police wanted to question Jack again, but he arrived with his lawyer, who presented a statement on his behalf. In this statement, Jack claimed that his memories of that night were unclear and incomplete. He confirmed that he was on a boat with Charlotte and that a girl was driving at the time of the accident. However, he had no recollection of the crash or the events leading up to it, except that Charlotte was at the helm of the boat. After the lawyer read the statement, Jack was asked numerous questions. But he chose not to respond to any of them. When an officer criticized him for not giving Charlotte a chance to save herself by not providing her with a life jacket, Jack remained silent. Later, the police chief learned that the day after the accident, on February 9th, Jack went directly from the police station to the registry office to apply for a marriage license with his longtime girlfriend. In November, they welcomed a child. This means that after Charlotte's death, Jack got married and then moved to Wales with his wife. He wanted to get away from where Charlotte died and start over somewhere where no one would recognize him. He wanted to forget the past and start a new life. The police decided not to close the case because they sensed something was off. They quietly kept an eye on Jack's activities. The search for Charlotte's belongings, which were lost in the river, continued. Eventually, they discovered her bag and mobile phone. It took nearly a year to recover, clean, and dry these items. When the experts examined the phone, they found a video from that night. The footage revealed that Jack was the one driving the boat, not Charlotte. It became clear that Jack was attempting to shift the blame to Charlotte for her own death. In the video, Charlotte could be heard shouting that the boat was going too fast, highlighting that Jack had lied about who was actually at the helm. They inspected the boat again. The police discovered life jackets hidden on the boat, which no one had used because Jack had not informed anyone about them. It was concluded that it was unlikely the girl was both driving the boat and filming the video at the same time, especially since Jack was frequently seen on camera standing behind the wheel. On September 20th, 2017, Jack was charged with manslaughter due to gross negligence. By October 2017, he appeared in court and was released on bail. However, on January 26, 2018, Jack failed to appear in court and pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. Meanwhile, the trial for Charlotte's death was approaching quickly. It was mid-May when Jack informed his legal team that he would not attend the hearing. He was determined not to go. When the trial began in July 2018, Jack followed through with his plan and did not appear in court. In contrast, Charlotte's family attended throughout the trial. They were understandably upset and informed on the first day that Jack would not be present. Jack's lawyers communicated with him online, sharing court documents for him to review and comment on. However, they did not know his exact location. Many were angry when Jack chose not to attend the trial, despite having legal representation. He seemed to believe that he was above the law and did not feel the need to be present because he claimed innocence. Jack repeatedly asserted his innocence and tried to blame Charlotte. Instead of appearing in court to defend himself or claim he did nothing wrong, he simply chose to hide. The court had to determine that Jack, as the owner of the boat, had a responsibility to ensure the safety of everyone on board, including Charlotte. The judge spent about 20 minutes looking at photos of the boat because they wanted to get an idea of the type of vessel Jack was using. All of Jack's girlfriends discovered that he had purchased an old boat at a low price from a website that sells second-hand items. Although the boat was in poor condition and required significant repairs, Jack, who had a good income, chose not to invest in fixing it. Instead, he used the boat for evening outings with his girlfriends. The court also found out that Jack had a date in August, shortly before he met Charlotte. As usual, their evening included a boat ride, during which they were stopped by the river police. The officers warned them about the importance of wearing life jackets to prevent any accidents. Jack had met this girl, like Charlotte and the others, on a dating site. They enjoyed their time together. He took her to the Shard, bought her drinks, invited her to his home, and then took her for a boat ride. However, he drove the boat at such a high speed that she became very frightened. Finally, she asked Jack to stop, let her off the shore, and call a taxi for her. The girl was called to court to testify. On July 10, 2018, Jack Shepherd was found guilty of manslaughter. Shortly after, news emerged that he had gone into hiding. His legal team tried to reach him, but he did not respond. On July 26, Jack was sentenced to 6 years in prison for the manslaughter of Charlotte Brown, yet his whereabouts remained unknown. Police launched an international search for Jack and offered a $25,000 reward for any information leading to his whereabouts. It was eventually discovered that Jack had fled to Turkey and then moved to Georgia. British media discovered his residence in Georgia, revealing that he was living in dire conditions. He wanted to appeal his sentence, and eventually, a lawyer suggested he go on television to share his side of the story. Jack consistently claimed that he did not remember the events of that night. His memories were vague. In every statement, he mentioned that he only recalled how Charlotte switched places with him on the boat and took his seat, after which the accident occurred. In the interview Jack prepared, he was more open about what transpired, yet he still blamed Charlotte for her death. He refused to accept any responsibility and instead spread misinformation to the media. Jack then surrendered to the Georgian police. He believed he could contest his extradition with the assistance of a lawyer who claimed his innocence. He also hoped to have his conviction overturned. However, he was extradited back to the UK to serve his 6-year prison sentence for the manslaughter of Charlotte Brown. Charlotte's mom expressed her deep sorrow, saying that words cannot capture how incredible her daughter was. She described Charlotte as her best daughter and closest friend. She wants Jack Shepherd to understand that while he enjoys his life with his family, she struggles to find joy in her own life. She shared that the experience has been overwhelmingly painful and it's impossible to fully convey the suffering her family endured.